Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you're watching second and final part of What If Naruto and Hinata Travel Back in Time. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
Does he move more quickly than I recall? As he avoided the spear, like bone protruding from Kimimaro's right palm, Sora pondered. Then a dim recollection came to him. That's correct. Sasuke claimed to be ill when I fought him, didn't he? That explains it. Dance of the Willow, Kimimaro muttered as he pulled out a second bone from his left palm and rotated it to launch aside. Attack. Gritting his teeth, Sora used one of his daggers to parry the bone. He appears to be stronger as well, so this could be challenging. Sora cursed his good fortune. He had to face Kimimaro, a close combat specialist with amazing offensive and defensive skills thanks to his Kekkei Genkai, in his first real battle since he had traveled back in time. Even if Kimimaro had only died of a disease during Sora's initial period, he would normally have been sure that he could defeat him. Regretfully, this was anything but typical. Sora lost some of his strongest techniques because he erred on the side of caution and only used his Byakugan, Sage Mode, or Rasengan when someone's life was in dire need. The amount of chakra he would need to give each clone to continuously use the technique, along with the fact that having multiple clones constantly generating different wind currents would interfere with Sora's own wind bursts, made it too risky and impractical, so he doubted they would do much good even if he tried to create shadow clones like in his first battle with Kimimaro. While Kimimaro was probably under strict orders to avoid being seen at all costs, Sora had an advantage because, although he had wanted to avoid attention up until this point, he was planning to reveal himself on the bridge at some point to turn the tide of events in his favor. He didn't want to bring Kimimaro to the battle on the bridge, so it wasn't much of an advantage, but it was something. As he spun, Kimimaro threw a bone from his elbow at Sora's head, narrowly missing his face by a few centimeters. Then, aiming for Sora's midsection, he lifted his knee, forming another weapon, which Sora deflected. Despite his inability to deliver a clean blow, Kimimaro kept moving in this manner, his body moving fluidly from one attack to the next. Sora leapt backwards, preparing his knives, and then blasted himself back towards his opponent with a gust of wind as Kimimaro pulled his palm back for another attack. In an almost instantaneous reaction, Kimimaro blocked the blow by forming a thick bone between his two hands. But Sora refused to back down, and he filled his daggers with wind chakra as he closed in. For a split second, Kimimaro's block held as steel and bone collided. Then Kimimaro's defenses were breached by Sora's knives, and he had to leap away before his bone was split. Looking at Kimimaro, Sora thought, "Those bones are strong. It looks like I'll have to put in more chakra next time." Kimimaro appeared to observe Sora for a moment while standing composedly. He said, "You're stronger than I expected, for the first time. Who are you? What is your purpose here?" Still suspicious of the man, Sora sneered and said, "How much of a fool do you think I am? I'm not going to answer any of your questions." "I see. Very well then. Still, I do not have time to waste, so I will end this battle here." The tattoo on Kimimaro's chest started to glow and spread throughout his body, and the man just nodded, as if unoffended. Sora rushed forward to try to exploit the narrow gap as soon as he saw what Kimimaro was doing. But Kimimaro was too fast, leaping back while his left arm sagged to the side and his other hand extended to draw a short-boned sword. Kimimaro used his new sword to block Sora's attack just as she was about to catch up to him. The cursed seal had been released, and the man was stronger and faster than before. "Dance of the Camellia," Kimimaro uttered as he struck back. Sora was struck by Kimimaro's blade, but he deflected it with one of his knives. Kimimaro pressed his attack, stabbing at Sora repeatedly, his weapon moving so quickly that it almost seemed to flicker. Sora shifted her strategy and jumped back. "Raiden," he said as a spark of electricity appeared on one of his knives. "Futon," he added, and a wind started to whirl around his other blade. With a shout of "Storm!" Sora swung both of his knives forward toward Kimimaro. Kimimaro was knocked backwards by two arcs that flew into him, one of which was of wind and the other of electricity. Kimimaro could hardly block it with his sword. As Kimimaro steadied himself, Sora kept up his pace, throwing lethal crescents of electricity and wind at his opponent. Although he was still clipped by some of the attacks, Kimimaro was forced to go on the defensive and retreated, avoiding and blocking them. After almost a minute, Kimimaro finally made a mistake. One of the wind arcs caught the man in the middle, causing him to be flung into a tree with his sword flying from his hand. Seizing the chance, Sora stopped his long-range attacks and dashed in Kimimaro's direction, arriving just before he recovered. Sora cut down at Kimimaro, but his blade caught on one of the numerous bones that unexpectedly exploded from his body. The song, "Dance of the Larch," said Kimimaro. Despite avoiding a final blow, the man was injured. He was bleeding and singed in multiple areas, but it seemed that he had escaped serious harm because Sora could see a shield of bone covering his internal organs beneath the skin's tears. Kimimaro acknowledged, "I underestimated you, but this is over now." Sora stepped back cautiously as Kimimaro's curse mark spread even more across his body, glowing again. Kimimaro's body started to change. His eyes developed noticeable markings, and his skin darkened to a purplish gray. His own eyes also underwent a transformation, with his irises turning golden and the sclera turning black. Large bones eventually started to protrude from his back, and even more remarkably, a large tail started to grow from the base of his spine and stretched until it was 1.5 meters long. At this point, his body started to slightly twist. Is he going to open his seal once more? Oh no, Sora thought. There's not much time left to deal with this jerk, but I can't let him get away. The battle on the bridge is about to end, and I'm not sure if a few clones can stop it without anyone dying. Kimimaro said, "Dance of the Clematis." Flower, as a weapon resembling a drill, formed around his hand. The man then started to run. Sora decided, inhaled deeply, and prepared himself. As he put his daggers away, he thought, "I hope I'm making the right decision." The air started swirling around him, its currents getting faster and faster as Sora started to form hand seals. He was going to end this, even though it might not have been how he would have liked to. Kakashi said, "Your future is death," as his Reikari exploded in his hand. Kakashi sprinted, closing the distance between him and Zabuza in a matter of seconds. He extended his hand to strike the fatal blow. Then something happened. Zabuza's companion, a boy, emerged from an ice mirror that had suddenly materialized. No, Kakashi pondered. It was too late for him to slow down. Kakashi couldn't alter his momentum in time because he was already traveling so quickly. Abruptly, a sudden gust of wind pushed Kakashi back, slowing him down. 5 men then emerged from the mist. Kakashi was moving so quickly that he only saw them through the dense mist because of his Sharingan. As Zabuza's companion was being slowed by the other men, the final man shoved him out of the way of Kakashi's attack, while the other 4 men seized Kakashi's arms. Kakashi did not reach Zabuza, but he persisted in moving forward despite the 4 men holding his arms, his Reikari crashing into the ice mirror. Even with 4 men slowing him down, Kakashi doubted Zabuza would have survived if he hadn't already been attempting to stop himself earlier. Instinctively, the copy ninja leapt far backwards, trying to catch up with the events of the previous few seconds. That, a well-known voice said, a little sour, as the 5 men came into view of Kakashi, was too close. It isn't possible. In an attempt to see through the fog and concentrate on the man who had spoken, Kakashi glanced around. Kakashi sighed in relief as he recognized the speaker and, now that he had stopped, realized that all 5 of the men surrounding him were the same. Sora-san. What Thea? He had been anticipating an ally, not an adversary, when his attack had been deflected. Of all people, he hadn't anticipated the appearance of his new friend. The fact that Sora had halted Kakashi's attack when he was on his way to an obviously hostile target surprised him even more. There should have been no way for Sora to know that he had been attempting to prevent himself from harming the child who had protected Zabuza, so the whole situation was perplexing and a little suspicious. Questions later, Kakashi, Sora interrupted before he could say anything more. There was a nervousness about the man. You need to get everyone away from here. We don't know how well the original is doing against him. Against who? What do you mean? A sword sliced through the clone and another clone, transforming them into puffs of smoke as the clone opened his mouth to speak. One of the clones exclaimed, "Crap," as the 3 survivors leapt to Kakashi's side. Neither Kakashi nor Sora's clones had noticed that the jutsu that had been holding Zabuza had ended because they were too preoccupied with a dire-sounding conversation and the mist was blocking their vision. Zabuza remarked, "Well done, Haku, now get up." "Yes, Zabuza-san," said Haku. Even though there was a hint of emotion in his voice, the boy still struggled to stand up. His voice nearly sounded guilty. Kakashi could only make out a hazy silhouette of Haku, but based on the boy's posture and shaky voice, he could tell that he was likely hurt from the boy's battle with Naruto and Sasuke. Kakashi felt a wave of anxiety sweep over him, and he felt compelled to go check on his students. What had happened to Naruto and Sasuke if Haku was present? He couldn't risk ignoring Zabuza, though. The man's students were virtually dead if he could defeat Kakashi and the clones. Zabuza aimed his sword at the clones of Sora. "I'm not sure who you are, but I appreciate your foolishness in preventing Kakashi's attack and saving my valuable tool. One of the clones retorted, I stopped his attack because that kid jumped in front of you, but we're dealing with a more serious issue. We musta. He began, but was cut off by a roar of sound, like a hurricane suddenly sweeping in. We're too late, one of the clones muttered, and the others all swore simultaneously. A twisting mass of wind erupted from the trees and flew towards the bridge, blowing away a large pocket of mist near the forest before Kakashi could even begin to guess what the clone was talking about. As the wind approached the bridge, it was in the vague outline of a dragon and, even more astonishingly, it had a hulking form in its jaws. The wind-made dragon flew high into the air before turning downward and crashing itself and its victim into the bridge, leaving a large crater and spitting up pieces of stone and wood. As the dust settled, a red-haired figure darted past the crater and stopped beside Kakashi and the three clones. Hello, Kakashi-san, Sora said, I apologize for being late. If nothing else, bringing Kimimaro into the fight would at least prevent Zabuza and Kakashi from trying to kill each other for the next few minutes. Sora took a moment to consider the situation, grateful that he'd made it in time. Based on the memories he'd gotten from his destroyed clones, it appeared that they'd been able to save Haku, but not to stop the fight itself. Kimimaro slowly stood up and started to survey his surroundings as the fog surrounding them started to dissipate. As he caught a better glimpse of the inhuman form that had just collided with the center of the bridge, Kakashi assumed a defensive stance. Another enemy? Calmly, Kakashi asked. Yes, unless absolutely necessary, stay away from him. Perhaps you and Zabuza won't want to kill each other later, he added to himself. He's dangerous, but if we work together it shouldn't be a problem. What on earth is that person? The man appeared to be reluctant to risk another attack at this time, so Zabuza asked, Are you leaf ninjas? What do you think about the fact that I just slammed him into a bridge? Perhaps I would have told you what I know about him by now if you weren't so busy swinging your sword around, Sora yelled. Where did he come from if he wasn't with Zabuza? Kakashi inquired, disregarding their altercation. The conversation was interrupted by a dejected voice calling, Kakashi, Sensei, and a Sora. Nissan? Is that you? Naruto was approaching them when everyone turned to look at him. Naruto? Kakashi inquired, Are you okay? No, the boy said, shaking his head. Yes, I am alright. It's Sasuke. He's... Naruto said, as if he was having trouble saying it, he's dead, Kakashi. Sensei. He lost his life defending me against Haku. Kakashi's eyes widened, and he whispered, Sasuke. He looked at Zabuza and Haku, but the boy just turned away, and Sora saw that Kakashi's eyes were fixed on Zabuza, clearly blaming the swordsman rather than Haku for Sasuke's apparent death. As Kimimaro's gaze appeared to linger on three figures off to the side, one of which lay motionless on the ground, covered by a young girl sobbing, Sora saw that he was frowning. Finally, Kimimaro said, It seems like you are telling the truth, boy. Sora's eyes widened as something clicked in his mind. He had been so focused on fighting Kimimaro up until this point that he hadn't had time to think about why the man was there in the first place. Of course, Sora thought, he's here to observe Sasuke. It was so clear that he should have realized it sooner. However, Sasuke looked dead to everyone who saw him at the moment, and since Kimimaro had been exposed and thought his target was dead, Sora could probably guess what the man would do next. He's just going to try and kill everyone here, Sora realized coldly. Kimimaro stabbed the ground with an arm. Hey, Sora. As he ran in the direction of Sakura and the others, Kakashi shouted. On it. While his three surviving shadow clones went to assist Kakashi in carrying Sasuke, Sakura, and Tazuna off the battlefield, Sora grabbed Naruto and leapt away from Kimimaro. Then there was a sudden explosion behind him, and Sora turned to see a little cloud of smoke circling Kimimaro's position. Have I gotten him? Naruto inquired from under his arm. Sora smirked and thought, nice try, but I think it'll take more than a small explosion to bring that guy down. At least he didn't blow himself up with those explosive tags. The seedling ferns dance, there was a voice that confirmed. A plethora of bone spires started to rise from the ground, forcing Sora to focus on dodging as the bridge rumbled. He bobbed and weaved, using the ground and even some of the spikes themselves, to keep Naruto and himself safe. As one of the spikes passed within a hair's breadth of the boy he was carrying, Sora grumbled, I detest this guy. These methods are absurd. The attack ended after a few more tense seconds, and Sora slid to a stop and looked around. The spires covered the entire bridge, but fortunately they didn't interfere too much with his view, and from what he could see, everyone had survived the attack relatively unharmed, including Zabuza and Haku, except for 2 of his clones. Kimimaro, however, was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, Sora heard a noise and spun around to confront his opponent. What the hell? He thought as Kimimaro swung 2 swords at him. He looked up just in time to see Kimimaro meld into one of his spikes as he dodged, being careful not to drop his younger self. Sora yelled, "He can move into and out of those spikes, but be careful." Sora wondered, where is he? He dropped Naruto next to him and said, "Stay close to me," as he began to scan the bridge for an attack that could come from anywhere. His final shadow clone, the one that had transported the ostensibly dead Sasuke's body to safety, was destroyed after a few tense moments, and fortunately the boy himself was unharmed, so Kimimaro would concentrate on attacking his opponents before focusing on someone he believed to be dead. After a few more seconds, Sora heard a clang of steel from his left, and as he turned, he saw Zabuza using his enormous sword to defend himself from an attack. Following a few more blows, Kimimaro retreated into one of his spikes, regaining the element of surprise. Over the course of the following 10 minutes, this same scene was repeated as Kimimaro attacked various group members at random from unpredictable directions, slashing with a sword, stabbing with a drill, or even shooting pieces of his finger bones in an attempt to kill his opponents. He showed no mercy, attacking even the young Naruto, Sakura, and Tazuna, though he attacked them less frequently than the others because he likely considered them to be weak points. As the battle dragged on without either side gaining much of an advantage, Sora began to grow more and more concerned. While Kakashi and Zabuza were both capable ninja in their own right, they were both so damaged and exhausted from their own battle with each other that they had difficulty keeping up with Kimimaro since, despite all of the punishment he'd taken, the man's bone armor had saved him from having much more than a few minor injuries that barely slowed him down. Furthermore, the 2 men were burdened even further because they had to protect those around them. While the fact that Kimimaro had ignored Sakura and Tazuna for the most part meant Kakashi could defend the 2 from the occasional attack without too much difficulty, he was severely limited by the fact that he had to look out for 2 people at the same time. Haku, on the other hand, was much harder to defend. He was so injured from his fight with Sasuke and a Kyuubi-empowered Naruto that he had trouble even dodging Kimimaro at all, having to be saved by Zabuza more than once. Sora wasn't certain why Kimimaro focused on the boy, since his injuries were obvious, but perhaps the man knew that Haku actually had the skill to prove a possible threat to him, even if it was only minor threat in his current state. Either way, the man had taken advantage of Haku's weakness, instead of largely ignoring him as he did Sakura, Naruto and Tazuna. As Kimimaro vanished following an attack on Kakashi's group, Sora muttered to himself, "This isn't good, unless we end this soon someone's going Toa." Haku! Naruto shouted from beside him. The flat of Zabuza's great sword pushed Haku away from Kimimaro's incoming drill. Like weapon, causing him to fly backwards, but this action put Zabuza in the path of the attack instead, and Kimimaro was so close that Zabuza wouldn't have time to reposition his sword to properly parry the blow. He made a last, desperate slash at Kimimaro, which left a deep gash, but it wasn't enough. Sora's head whipped around just in time to see Haku fly backwards. No! Sora thought horribly as she watched helplessly as Zabuza was smashed. As he fell to the ground, his sword falling from his grasp, Zabuza thought, "What the hell did I do that for?" He felt no pain as he hit the ground. In fact, he could hardly feel anything at all. Zabuza was dying. He could already feel himself slipping away. "At least I managed to force my monster of an opponent back," he noted smugly as he watched the enigmatic ninja retreat. "So this is it, huh?" It was funny. After all those years of only thinking about himself, first as a ninja of the mist and then later as a sword for hire, he would end up protecting someone someone he had claimed to be his tool, no less. He didn't know why he did it, but maybe it was that few minutes ago when he was sure Haku would die defending him from Kakashi's attack that made him feel the need to protect him. Maybe he had always cared for Haku enough to die for him. All he knew was that his body had moved of its own free will before his mind had had a chance to register what was happening. As his vision deteriorated, he saw Haku kneeling beside him, tears in his eyes, shouting something, but by now Zabuza was unable to understand what the boy was saying, much less reply. "Sorry, Haku, but it looks like you're on your own now," Zabuza said in a low voice. Perhaps now, at least, the boy would be able to find a life of his own that did not require him to fight and kill for someone else's selfish desires, but Zabuza made a decision just as his own thoughts were slowing down. He had no regrets about giving up his life for Haku's. In fact, he was happy to die in his place. A tiny, invisible smile emerged beneath his mask as the world finally vanished. "What a soft fool that kid turned me into," Zabuza thought, "and I didn't even notice until now." The man howled with laughter inside his head at the realization. Sora cursed at himself. Damn it, what the hell was I thinking? He knew Zabuza could not have survived that attack, especially since it had torn a hole through the middle of his chest. What's worse is that if he hadn't been so concerned about concealing some of his abilities, Sora could have easily saved his life. I might not have had time to enter Sage mode, he thought, but if I had just used the Rasengan against Kimimaro, or even my Byakugan once that bastard had started to emerge from all those spikes, maybe I could have. Sora interrupted himself with a vigorous headshake. No, there's no point in thinking about this right now, and I can't just go around disclosing my secrets to save one or two people I hardly know. I need to stay focused. I need to remember why I came here in the first place. I need Toa. Then Sora snapped out of his reverie when he saw a slight distortion in one of the spikes close to Kakashi. He saw Kakashi turn in surprise and start to move towards her, shouting at the girl to run, but he knew the man wouldn't be able to get to her in time. Time seemed to slow down as Sora took in the scene. A pink-haired girl, dead in Sasuke's arms, and Sora hadn't even been able to comfort her as she passed. He'd never forgiven himself for it. Kimimaro was just starting to emerge from one of his pillars of bone halfway across the bridge from him. Sora clenched his fists and made his decision because, unlike when he'd witnessed Kimimaro's deadly attack on Zabuza, he knew that there might be time for him to save the girl, but only if he was extremely lucky and did something incredibly stupid. It wasn't as if he could bring himself to make any other decision regardless of his plan or the consequences of his actions. Sora gritted his teeth and blasted himself towards Kimimaro with a violent gust of wind, knowing that one death was more than enough and that he couldn't allow Sakura to die too. In most fights, Sora's wind walking technique had the potential to be far more versatile than the Hiraiishin, as it enabled one to move in any direction they wished without any preparation. However, this advantage came at a cost. While the Hiraiishin may allow one to teleport across the battlefield to a specific seal without expending much energy, that same distance could be much more taxing through wind walking because, unlike the technique his father had perfected, wind walking didn't actually teleport its user to a pre-chosen area. Instead, it moved them across that distance physically. This high-speed movement took a heavy toll on one's body, and controlling the necessary wind currents for the technique required a great deal of energy and skill. This was the main reason that Sora limited himself to short bursts of movement. It wasn't that his technique didn't allow one to move farther or faster than the small bursts Sora used it for. In fact, he knew that he could theoretically move kilometers with his technique in one burst. No, the real problem was that no one's body, not even his, could be made to endure moving at such a high speed for very long. If he pushed himself too much, he could easily kill himself. To make matters worse, the technique was so draining that he could have trouble fighting after using it recklessly, even if he did manage to survive moving a far distance. Finally, the speed of his movement during these bursts restricted the way he could safely attack. This was due to the fact that he needed to slow himself before striking if he wanted to avoid injuring himself with the recoil from hitting someone at his maximum velocity. Sora ignored the logical part of him, which seemed to be trying to warn him of the danger of what he was trying, as all these explanations passed through his mind in a fleeting moment. After only a few meters, he felt pain shoot through his body, the sheer force of his movement starting to take its toll. After a few more meters, his bones started to crack and he could feel his chakra dwindling at a startling rate, but he had enough stamina to ignore it for a few more meters. Sora ignored all of these signs, focusing on the figure approaching his former teammate, a bone drill covering his opponent's left arm, a drill made of bone. He could feel tiny cracks in his left arm and the cracking of a few more ribs, but Sora ignored this as he skidded to a stop just between Kimimaro and Sakura, letting his reflexes take over and producing a ball of energy in his right hand. Sora quickly decelerated his movement by creating a gust of wind from the opposite direction, making him feel as though he had slammed into a brick wall. "Avoid her!" he shouted as he kicked off the ground and pushed his arm in the direction of his adversary. For a brief moment, Kimimaro appeared to be staring at him, as though he was incredulous that Sora had crossed half the battlefield in such a short period of time. He quickly gathered himself, though, and raised his weapon to block Sora's attack. For a brief moment, it held, but after a few seconds, it started to crack and weaken. Finally, Sora's Rasengan broke through Kimimaro's defense, and the Sound Ninja's left arm was severed at the elbow before he came to a halt a few meters away. "Reikari!" a voice shouted behind him. Sora looked back in time to see Kakashi strike and exposed Kimimaro with his final blow, striking him in the stomach, and then the Sound Ninja took a shaky step forward, teetered for a second, and then fell backwards onto the ground, his transformation from the curse seal beginning to drain away a few moments later. Kakashi's attack probably wouldn't kill the mana he knew a valuable prisoner when he saw Oniya, but it would ensure that Kimimaro was out of commission long enough to stabilize his condition and secure him for transport back to the village. After what their opponent had managed to survive thus far, Sora was relieved that Kakashi wasn't taking any chances. He grinned grimly satisfied for a moment, then fell to his knee, clutching his side. Sakura said, Thanks Uzumaki-san, Kakashi. Sensei, with a white face. Before focusing on Sora, Kakashi gave her a smile and then looked around at the other group survivors. How are you? Kakashi, who was still standing over the fallen Kimimaro, inquired. Yes, Sora said with a nod. Only a few fractures and cracked ribs. As he forced himself to stand, he affirmed, I'll be fine. I was just reminded of the precise reason I only use windwalking for brief periods of time. I just pulled a stunt that caused the majority of the damage I've sustained. Kakashi watched him for a few more seconds, as though he was going to ask the question they both knew was on his mind, but fortunately the man just nodded, putting his interest on hold for now. Feeling guilty, Sora sighed and walked over to stand beside Kakashi, looking over to where Zabuza's prone body lay and shaking his head solemnly. For what it's worth, Zabuza, I truly am sorry things turned out this way, he thought. What should we do with him, in your opinion? We can't just keep him here until you finish your mission, Sora said. You're correct. Kakashi turned to face Sasuke in his prone position and said, I think I should get them away from here. Once they're well, I'll send Sakura and Naruto with you to take him back. A handful of genin couldn't handle this. He's not dead, a voice in the background informed them. The two turned to face Haku, who was receiving Naruto's support and appeared even worse than he had a few minutes before. Kakashi's expression was one of disbelief and a glimmer of hope, while Sora pretended to be the same. What are you saying? Kakashi questioned doubtfully. I mean, I didn't murder him. Sakura covered a gasp before frantically running towards her teammate, with Tazuna at her heels in case she needed assistance with the boy. There was no reason to, Haku acknowledged, gesturing to the side at a slowly moving Sasuke. Thank God, Kakashi whispered, exhaling deeply. Haku pointed to Kimimaro and muttered, but, I will kill him. Kakashi firmly stated, no, we're taking him to Konoha for interrogation. Zabuza-san was killed by him. Zabuza. Sana, I'm the reason he died. Since I was weak. How is Zabuza-san going to be avenged if this man survives? Haku took half a step towards Kakashi, but then stumbled, falling to his knees in exhaustion. Zabuza. Sana. Haku, don't worry, you'll get through this, Naruto said, placing a hand on his shoulder. He tried to console the boy by saying, I'm your friend, I'll be here for you. Despite appearing empathetic, Kakashi remained in his place. Please be strong, Haku, Sora begged. Kimimaro turned away from everyone else and concentrated on Sora, saying, it seems that even now, abruptly rasping to get the group's attention, my failures continue to be compounded further. Will you now tell me who you are? Sora sighed, figuring that since it was a fake, it didn't really matter if he told the man his name now that Kimimaro was lost. Finally, Uzumaki Sora, he said. I understand. He appeared to be thinking about something as he looked at Sora. And you, as we fought, I realized that you're like me, he said. And Uzumaki, your clan is like mine. Dead or scattered to wind. You seem like someone who has lost everything and treasures the few things that still give them meaning, based on the look in your eyes. Sora felt a glimmer of sympathy as she gazed at the man. Kimimaro concluded with confidence, closing his eyes, but even though you've defeated me, you will never stop him. Yes, perhaps you can understand me. A gloomy smile appeared on his face. Unfortunately for you, you shall gain nothing more from my failure. Everyone jumped away from him as he said, Danzo of the Zinnia. The group retreated even more in anticipation of a last-ditch assault, but nothing materialized. Instead, a simple spike of bone exploded through Kimimaro's chest, directly where his heart was, causing him to exhale sharply before becoming motionless. Kakashi sighed after a short while and put his headband back over his Sharingan, saying, what a crazy bastard. Bringing him home alive would be asking for too much, wouldn't it? Sora knelt beside Kimimaro's body and pulled a large scroll from his haori. I can seal his body away at the very least, he told the Jonin, forming a few hand signs. Maybe that will give us a clue as to who he's working with. He took a moment to look at Haku once more as he finished sealing the corpse into the scroll. Naruto was still beside the boy, trying to get a response from him, but Haku barely seemed to care, staring off towards the area where Zabuza had died. Even Kimimaro's death didn't seem to satisfy him. He was just sitting motionless with a dejected expression on his face. So, Kakashi claimed, capturing Sora's interest once more. Do you agree with him? How about we're the same? I've lost a lot of things, more than you might imagine, and I do understand his feelings, Sora said, shaking his head as he got to his feet and grinning a little. But no, he was wrong. Not everything I value has been lost. I do feel like I have a purpose, but unlike him, I don't fear losing it. Instead of fearing that I would have no path at all, I chose my path because I believe in it. There was a faint smile beneath Kakashi's mask, but before he could say another word, there was a loud clapping in the distance, and Sora squinted toward it, catching sight of a large group of men as the last of the mist dissipated. Excellent work. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to have all of my friends kill all of you now, yelled the plump little man who had started the clapping. A few hours into their drive back to the village, Leah grumbled, "It's a waste of my time that you're forcing me to travel all the way to your village with you. My brother already gave you permission to make a summoning contract with my pride, so you could call me from anywhere." Naomi teased, "Walking all the way back by myself would be too lonely," without bothering to glance back at the form that was right behind her. It was a lie, of course, but she didn't see the need to tell Leah the truth just yet. "All right. I don't give a damn. I don't even like you, and I'm not here to amuse you." Naomi shrugged. She's as direct as I recall, and she knew that the lioness's lack of complete trust was the main cause of the animosity, but she also knew that Leah would eventually come to like her. That's what had happened the first time, after all. "I guess that's too bad since you're stuck with me anyway," Naomi teased, laughing to herself. "You smile and laugh more than I'd expect from someone who claims to come from such a terrible future." Not even realizing that night had fallen, Naomi slowed to a halt and gazed up at the darkening sky. "And what did you expect? A woman hardly able to keep herself together?" "Wella." Leah trailed off, unfamiliar with the inquiry. Naomi acknowledged, "I have been that way at times," recalling her earlier encounters with her father and sister. "You see, the old me, she couldn't handle the things that happened. The things I went through," she said. "Because of the war, I had to change. Nevertheless, that timid, afraid little girl will always be a part of me, and occasionally she influences my emotions." "Nevertheless," she said, turning to face Leah, "I refuse to let that girl's anxieties dictate my actions. I refuse to let depression consume me, even after losing my entire family and the majority of my friends. I couldn't allow myself to simply deteriorate over the rest of my life. I suppose I'm this way to demonstrate that I'm still capable of being happy, you know? It may just be a naive delusion, but forcing myself to not dwell on the past, to smile and laugh even when times are sad, it helps keep me going, it gives me hope." She smiled sadly at her companion. "I have to remind myself that I haven't lost everyone. That I still have something more to live for than old memories. I didn't really ask for a monologue, but I guess if you need to talk to someone, it might as well be me. Besides, it did explain some things," Leah said, shaking her head and shouldering her way past Naomi. "Anyway, you're beginning to make me feel down, so stop this bullshit." "Sorry, I didn't mean to ramble like that," Naomi laughed. "It's okay." She paused, then said, "Well, not as much of a crazy woman as I thought a few minutes ago at any rate. At least now I know you aren't some crazy woman." Grinning to herself, Naomi started to pursue the lioness. "Naomi?" Leah asked abruptly, turning to face the woman again with a glimmer of sympathy in her eyes. "Well," she paused, then said, "Never mind, let's leave." "Yes, exactly as I recall." Naomi's smile widened. She cares, but she's too obstinate to acknowledge it. As the two walked into the night, a friendly silence descended upon them. "You're still here, kid? It's my lucky day, I suppose. You brat, I can now make up for what you did to my arm." Waving his bandaged limb in the air, Gato walked a few meters out into the open while sneering. "Gato!" Haku snarled and stood up. A chilly voice said, "So they finally came out," and Haku turned to see that the red-haired man Sora he had previously called himself was speaking. "It took them long enough," Haku said. "For the last 10 minutes, they have been hiding back there. Gato is probably the one who finds it impossible to stop talking. Is he in charge?" "Yeah," said Kakashi, "so you also saw them?" "Of course." "Hold on, what? Both of you were aware of their presence the entire time?" Naruto grumbled. "It's hard to hide 40 people climbing onto a bridge," Kakashi said, nodding. "They weren't heard by me. I'm not surprised you missed the signs. We were in the middle of a fight," he shrugged. "You will recover in due time, so don't worry. The townspeople are probably on their way too," Sora said. "I saw some kid organizing them on the way here." "Inari had to be that person," Naruto cried. "I was happy that he had finally defended himself. but I didn't anticipate that he would unite the entire town immediately after I departed. I didn't catch the child's name, but maybe it was, Sora said. In any case, they will most likely arrive shortly. Haku turned his attention to Gato and ignored the other conversation, asking, "Why are you here?" "Well, after you completed the small task I gave you, I had come to kill you and that jerk, Zabuza." With a sardonic smile, Gato explained, "But it turns out you were too useless to even get that right. But since you're all going to die, I suppose it doesn't really matter much either way." "You are not even worthy of killing in his memory," Haku growled, squinting his eyes. "You are not worthy of speaking Zabuza San's name." He took a shaky step toward the mercenary group, but was stopped by a firm hand on his shoulder. "But I will make an exception this one time and end your pathetic life, you disgusting worm." He turned and saw that the red-haired man was preventing him from moving forward. Haku attempted to shake off the man's hold, but the man's strength surprised him and held him in place. "Leave me alone. This is my fight," he protested, glaring at the man. "Normally you might be able to take care of these men without any trouble, but right now you're covered in injuries and barely able to stand," Sora said, simply shaking his head. "Attempting to combat them alone will only result in your death." "Then let me go. I'll at least bring Gato along," Haku, who was still struggling, retorted. "There's no reason for you throw your life away, Haku, no matter what you might think. No cause. Now my life has no purpose. I don't need to care if I live or die, you don't." Sora interrupted him with a cold glare, saying, "This isn't a suggestion. You'll remain here. We'll deal with Gato and his men first, then you can argue about your foolish death wish." Haku sagged. He had to admit that he would not be able to escape the man's hold, he just did not have enough strength left in his state. "Brat, are you having problems there? Are you so worthless that you now require the protection of your enemies?" Gato scoffed. Furious at the insult, Haku turned to face Gato but did not provide the man with the satisfaction of a reply. "What's the matter? I've had enough of insults." Haku caught a glimpse of Gato laughing out of the corner of his eye, and a moment later, Gato was on the ground, howling in agony as he gripped the spot where a kunai had punctured his leg. "At last. Does that obnoxious toad ever stop talking? He is nearly as awful as the Dobie." With a nearly imperceptible smirk on his lips, Haku turned to see the dark-haired boy, Sasuke, limping towards them, followed closely by the bridge builder and the pink-haired girl, who were probably concerned that Sasuke was moving so soon after his purported death. Sasuke paused among the group and looked around, his gaze darting between the massive spikes left over from the previous battle on the bridge. "What the how long was I out? What took place here? And what the hell are you doing here?" he whispered, then looked up at Sora. Simply dismissively waving his hand, Sora said, "It's a long story." Kakashi took a few steps forward and shook his head, saying, "We can talk about it later." Taking a moment to assess his students, he said, "Normally, I'd sideline the three of you from fighting at all, considering how injured you all are from the last two ambushes we dealt with," pointing broadly to the group of mercenaries who appeared unsure of how to act while Gato was writhing on the ground. "Remember that we still have a mission to complete and enemies to take care of," he said. He finished, eyeing Haku, and the boy frowned slightly. "Fortunately, it appears that Gato doesn't have anyone left that's more useful than this bunch of thugs, so I'll let you help so long as none of you run in with a death wish like our friend over there," he said. "Naruto, create as many shadow clones as you can," Kakashi ordered without turning around, and the ninja turned back to face the dreadfully outnumbered group of mercenaries, sighing as though defeating them was merely a chore. "If you still have the chakra, Sasuke, use fire jutsu to pin them down, but first scare some of them away with a warning shot. Sakura, remain in the back and hurl shuriken or kunai at anyone who attempts to advance. And Sora," he looked directly into the man's eyes, "will you please watch out that no one bursts in like a careless fool? I've had enough of my pupils almost passing away in a single day." "Of course," he nodded, and Sora smiled. The mercenaries held their ground and started to raise their weapons, cockily shouting insults at the Leaf Ninja as he drew closer. "Thanks," Kakashi said, starting to move towards the mercenaries once more. His students moved forward a few meters, but they did as their teacher said and kept a safe distance back. A few of the mercenaries finally had the audacity to attack once Kakashi was within a few meters of Gato, who was still on the ground outside the protection of his men, if only to keep their paycheck intact. 4 of the thugs rushed forward to hack at Kakashi, but his weapons sailed through the air as he deftly sidestepped each blow. Before his opponents could recover, the Jonin drove his elbow into the head of the lead attacker, then spun around to kick another man in the knee, breaking the joint. He turned, dodging a phorobic swing from the third man, before grabbing the mercenary's arm and hurling him into the last man. "No, don't come near me. Help me, one of you bastards," Gato begged. He called out to his men, who were all looking at Kakashi with shocked expressions on their faces. His orders jolted his goons into action, but none of them could get to Gato in time, so Kakashi just grabbed the man by the shirt and tossed him across the bridge. "Shadow clone jutsu," Kakashi said carelessly as he made a dozen copies of himself. Now, he instructed his pupils. Haku watched passively, not even trying to escape Sora's hold to join the assault, but it didn't really matter. As soon as Kakashi killed 4 of his comrades, some of the mercenaries started to retreat. By the time he and Naruto formed an army and Sasuke launched a fireball into the air, they were all fleeing for their lives. "Well, that was easy," responded Kakashi. On his way back, Kakashi caught Gato where he had landed and pulled him along with him, throwing the whining businessman in front of Tazuna. "You own him. What to do with him is up to you and your fellow citizens." Gazing at Kakashi with wide eyes, Tazuna said, But why? Our contract didn't say this." "It's not necessary. Simply refer to it as payment for providing us with lodging for the previous few weeks. You have no idea how this will affect my people. Gato was a huge source of suffering for us." The bridge builder bowed his head respectfully and said, "I cannot thank you enough for the opportunity to bring him to justice." Haku started to hear shouts from over the bridge at that point, and he saw a large number of the townspeople hurrying toward them with sickles, pitchforks, sticks, and other improvised weapons. Their faces changed from fear to appreciation and amazement as they arrived and registered Gato's prone form. As the townspeople cheered, Naruto laughed and congratulated a child, but he told him it was too late to witness the action. And Gato cursed as the townspeople dragged him off to whatever punishment they had in store for him. Haku hardly paid attention to the conversation going on around him, only noticing bits and pieces. A voice said, "I don't think they'll kill him, you know." When Haku looked up, he saw that almost everyone had left. He hadn't even noticed Sora releasing Hima and that Kakashi, Naruto, and Sora were the only ones remaining on the bridge. "What?" Haku inquired bewilderedly. "They were talking about jailing and punishing Gato, but no one mentioned actually executing him," Sora said. "Ah, I see and you're not bothered by that? Is it appropriate?" Haku inquired. "You were threatening to kill him the second he showed up." "Yeah." He paused, unable to think of a suitable answer. "You never really cared about killing Gato, did you?" Sora asked, shaking his head. "Not him specifically, no," Haku sighed, closing his eyes. "My life is meaningless without Zabuza-san. All I want now is for it to stop." He opened his eyes. "It seemed better to die to bring justice to a wicked man than to ask one of you to kill me." Gato happened to be present. "And I suppose that with Gato gone, you want us to kill you now?" Sora said, wiping a hand across his face. "Why do you think you have no reason left to live?" he asked, fixing Haku with a look. Haku responded, "A tool is useless without someone to use it." "Is it truly invisible to you?" Kakashi spoke up. "Look what?" Kakashi shook his head and remarked that no man would die for something he only saw as a tool. "What are you attempting to express?" Haku's voice tightened in exasperation as he demanded. "That Zabuza cared about you," Sora said. "That even if he never admitted it, he saw you as more than a tool." "No, you're mistaken. So why did he keep you safe? What made him sacrifice himself for you?" "I'm not sure. I don't know he whispered. "But it can't be true," Haku said, falling to his knees as tears started to well up in his eyes. "It would only make matters worse if Zabuza-san truly cared about me. It would imply that I was an ineffective tool. That would make me even more responsible for his demise. What would you have me do? It would mean that I've lost even more than I thought I had." Haku fixed his unblinking gaze on the ground. "You never stop lecturing me, but why should I continue to live?" After a pause, Sora finally said, "I don't know," with a hint of regret in his voice. "I wish that I did, but I don't. No one else can determine what your life's purpose is. You must discover it for yourself. I will say this, though. Dying is a waste of time and a slight to Zabuza's sacrifice. You should choose your own route and go forward if you genuinely wish to honor him." Haku was hurt by the implication that he was squandering Zabuza's sacrifice, but Sora's statement was grounded in reality. "But even if I thought I could move forward, even if I thought I could find a new purpose, I'm not strong enough to do what you ask," Haku said with a deep sigh. "Perhaps you're right," he acknowledged. "I owe Zabuza-san more for everything he did for me than giving up." He shook his head regretfully. "You have no idea how my life was before Zabuza-san came to my rescue. I will be alone for the rest of my life without him." He acknowledged, "It's not that I want to die. I just prefer death to a life of loneliness." "But you're not alone," someone clarified. Surprised, Haku looked up to see Naruto standing above him. The boy had been so unusually silent that Haku had almost forgotten he was there at all. "Remember what I told you earlier?" The boy smiled slightly and extended his hand to Haku, saying, "I'm your friend, and friends don't desert each other." For a long time, Haku just stared at Naruto. He had known the boy had offered to be his friend, but he had not been able to convince himself that it was true, since doing so would have only put him at risk of harm. "What?" dumbly, Haku asked. Naruto grabbed one of his arms and pulled him to his feet, repeating, "I said that I'm your friend," adding, "and no matter what happens, you always will be." "Iya." Haku trailed off, unable to think of anything to say. Kakashi said, "You know, Sora's right. This is the part where you thank the kid and stop trying to throw your life away. It would truly be a waste," he continued, glancing at the location where Zabuza's body was still lying. "Thank you," was Haku's sincere response. "I won't lie and say it will be easy," Sora said, drawing a glance from Haku. "Try. But please, at least make an effort to proceed." "Iya, perhaps he's right," Haku decided. "I'll give it a shot." He looked at Naruto and remarked, "It will never be the same without Zabuza-san. But maybe I do have reason to hope." Naruto offered, "You could come to Konoha with us," and then he appeared to recall, looking up at Kakashi. "He can, right, sensei?" Kakashi shrugged. "Well, given his circumstances, the third might be willing to give him a chance if we vouch for him. Normally, we don't take ninja into our village. We've just been fighting. The fact that the child is talented would also help him. But just an hour ago, I was your adversary, and you're not now. If a former opponent hasn't caused the Leaf too much harm and doesn't represent a significant risk, we have no problem hiring them. Believe me, you wouldn't just walk in and be done with it. After passing a battery of tests, having your background checked, and being cleared by our interrogation team, you will likely be placed on probation for a few years. Overall, though, it's not a bad deal." "All right. What do you say?" Naruto said, reaching out to Haku. "Thank you for the offer, but there are still some questions I must find answers to. Answers I do not think I can find simply staying in Konoha." He glanced at Sora and said, "For the time being, I must walk my own path." Haku's hand twitched and he started to raise it, but then he remembered something. "If I seek purpose, I must find it myself." The man with the red hair gave him a respectful nod. "Are you certain?" With regret, Naruto inquired. "I am," Haku replied, "but I would like to take you up your offer someday, if it stands." "It will," reassured Kakashi. "Are you certain you'll be alright on your own?" With a hint of doubt in his voice, Sora inquired. The boy said, "I won't like it, but for the time being, it's enough to know that I won't always be alone, that I have somewhere to go back to, and that I can still hope. I never had that much before Zabuza-san discovered me." Naruto placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "You can always rely on me, so please let me know if you ever need anything." "I know that now," Haku chuckled about it. After bowing to the three ninjas surrounding him, Haku approached Zabuza's body, retrieved his enormous cleaver from the ground, tied it to his back with a length of rope from his tool pouch, and then leaned down to carefully pick him up. He would be lying if he said he wasn't still devastated by Zabuza's death, and even if he managed to move on, he doubted that the wound from the loss would ever fully heal. However, he felt lighter and more at peace than he would have ever thought possible in this situation, and it seemed to Haku that the hope Naruto had given him, just by claiming him as a friend, helped to give him the resolve to keep walking forward. Maybe this wasn't the end he had thought, it was just a short while ago. Maybe it was just a new beginning. Naomi sat on the Hokage monument overlooking the village, thinking, "It really is beautiful here. I hope it doesn't suffer as much damage as it did the last time." The location had been one of her favorite spots to visit when she was younger, but she hadn't had a chance to return since she and Sora had arrived in the village, and since Leah had left the village the day before and Sora still hadn't returned from the Land of Waves, Naomi had decided that now was as good a time as any to come here and collect her thoughts. She had been troubled by the fact that the Hokage was only going to tell a select few people about the invasion during the Chunin exams. She knew it was necessary, of course. Tipping their hand to Orochimaru would only cause him to change his plans to attack at a time they couldn't predict. Furthermore, the man was bound to have more spies in the village than Kabuto, who was the only one she and Sora actually knew of for certain. Still, just because it was the best course of action did not mean she liked it. It wasn't all bad, though. She'd chosen to fight in the actual invasion, at least, rather than against Orochimaru, just in case something got out of hand. While her taijutsu would be useful in the smaller skirmish against the traitor, she could make much more of a difference in the larger battle against the sound and sand forces with her genjutsu. Besides, she trusted Sora and the third could beat Orochimaru so long as nothing too unexpected came up from their effect on the timeline. Naomi whispered, "Sensei always did say that a bigger group just meant there were more people to trick, and she proved it, eventually," she reminded herself, shivering a little as she recalled the last genjutsu Kurenai had ever used. Although she had worked with her teacher to develop the technique, it had always unnerved her, even though she had never used it herself. Sometimes she worried that the attack was too cruel, even for an enemy, but most of the time the woman simply questioned whether the technique was worth the risk it exposed its user to, wondering if they would have lost Kurenai that day if they had never made that cursed genjutsu in the first place. Naomi shook her head, smiling fondly at the thought of the Jonin lecturing her, even though she had long since come to terms with the admittedly small, indirect part she played in Kurenai's fate. She had been the closest thing Naomi had to a mother since her own had died when she was a child, and she had ultimately protected so many people. I'd have done the same thing in her position. Besides, she'd scold me if she ever knew I was worrying about what ifs today. After spending the first half of her life there, Naomi continued to watch the Hyuga estate, losing track of time as she daydreamed about the people who lived there, until a soft noise jolted her out of her reverie and she turned to see someone staring at her, clearly surprised. Naomi turned her gaze to a remote compound, away from the center of the village, and even without opening her eyes, she was certain she could guess some of what was happening behind its high gates. "I apologize, I didn't know anyone else was here," her younger self stumbled. "I'm going to leave you alone," she retreated. "I'm pretty sure there's enough space on this mountain for the two of us, Hinata-san." Naomi laughed. "Come sit," she said, patting the floor next to her. "To be honest, I could use the companionship." After giving the offer some apparent thought, Hinata hurried forward and took a seat beside the elderly woman. Even though Naomi had previously seen her younger self even helping train Hinata and the other members of Team 8 at Kurenai's request, she wasn't quite sure what to say because she hadn't yet spent time alone with the young girl. "So, why have you come here?" Naomi took a chance. The girl rambled, "I just wanted to leave the Hyuga compound for a short time." After a few minutes of silence, Naomi looked sideways and saw Hinata twiddling her thumbs and sneaking peeks at her. The woman assured me, "You don't have to tell me why," knowing that her younger self would not like being bothered. She didn't need to ask, of course, because she could easily come up with a few possible reasons why the girl might have come here. "Thank you," Naomi hummed indifferently, content to just sit and keep observing the village. "How did you build up your strength?" Hinata inquired abruptly. A strange query. "But you really want to know how you can get stronger, don't you?" Shook her head, Naomi said. "I'm sorry, but I'd rather not say." "Please do not misunderstand," Naomi said. "I have nothing against you." Hinata turned away, her face showing pain, but Naomi stopped her with a hand gesture before the girl could make any assumptions. "There was nothing specific I did, no training regimen I followed, to become strong," she said, pausing briefly before continuing. "I had no choice but to get stronger. The situation that necessitated that. I wouldn't want you to bear that burden." With patience, Naomi turned away from Hinata and said, "Thina, see. Could you help me, instead? To get stronger, I mean," the girl said shyly. "What?" Looking at the girl, Naomi scowled to herself. "Well, that's not what I expected. Why would you want my help? You hardly know me at all." "Kurenai. Sensei has been a great help, and I've gotten stronger since she started teaching me, but it still isn't enough," the girl said after a prolonged period of looking down. "You don't treat me like most people do, like I'm a letdown that isn't worth the effort to teach," Hinata said, looking up at her. "I need to do more. I believe you can make me stronger than I could be on my own. Would you kindly assist me in training occasionally, if you are not overly busy?" Naomi smiled at her younger self. "When would you like to begin? I guess it would give me a good excuse to make the girl think." The atmosphere between him and Sora had been tense ever since their last battle, and although Kakashi doubted his students could notice it, it had been a few days since they had left Wave. The Jonin was usually fairly suspicious, but he usually avoided asking intrusive questions of his comrades, but at this moment he felt he had no choice. There was only one question he really needed an answer to, and that was why Sora had saved Haku, as well as the man's peculiar behavior. Kakashi took one last look around the campsite to make sure his students were asleep before approaching Sora. "We need to talk, Sora-san," Kakashi muttered. "I guess it was only a matter of time," Sora admitted. "We aren't talking about it, Kakashi-san." Kakashi insisted, that technique, knowing that Sora understood his question. "We're not talking about it," I said. "I will train your students, I will be your friend," I am willing to fight and die alongside you, and I promise you that I'm not a threat to the village, Sora growled, circling on him. But that doesn't mean I need to give you answers, the man said, shaking his head. Sakura-san would have died by now if I had been sincere about keeping all of my powers from you. You owe me that much, Kakashi, so just leave me alone. The Jonin watched as Sora made his way back to their camp, supposedly to keep watch over another area. He wiped his eyes and turned his head away, thinking, well, that went about as well as could be expected. If he was being honest, he had to admit that Sora had a point. The man had saved one of his students, even though he'd clearly known that it would raise some questions. What irritated Kakashi, however, was how unlikely this situation was. It would be easy if he could simply be suspicious of Sora being a thief or a liar, but he couldn't. Unless the man had studied with Jiraiya behind his back, it should be impossible for him to know the Rasengan. As he walked away, Kakashi shook his head and said, I really do owe the man that much at least, since he'd only used the Rasengan to save Sakura. It doesn't matter though, I also owe it to Minato Sensei to get to the bottom of this. Whether I'm an ally or a friend, I will find out the truth, one way or another, he said, promising to keep the truth to himself. A messenger with a weary expression rushed into his dark room. Report, commanded Orochimaru. We recently got word from Kabuto-sama. He still hasn't reported in, the messenger said shakily, referring to Kimimaro-sama. Orochimaru remained silent. Kimimaro had never been late, much less failed, before, and although he didn't believe his strongest follower could be defeated on a routine mission, the prospect was unsettling. Orochimaru-sama? Hesitantly, the messenger inquired. Go, he growled. The man was left alone as the messenger quickly left the room. My body, he thought irritably, slamming his hand into the desk in front of him. If Kimimaro lost my next body without even discovering any information on Sasuke. The ninja had been depending on Kimimaro's skills to make sure his invasion went smoothly, but now that he wasn't sure whether Kimimaro was dead or alive, his plans would have to change. He wasn't willing to waste time or rely on chance. He would definitely have to think about finding additional ninja to resurrect for his battle against the third Hokage, but first. Watch out! Orochimaru let out a bark. Suddenly, a man knelt down in front of Orochimaru. With a sly grin, he said, send a message to Kabuto, as well as the rest of my laboratories. Tell them I'll be needing the prisoners and failed experiments. They left the Hokage's tower, and Naruto cried out, finally, did we have to go see the old man right after we got back? That mission took forever. Kakashi laughed. That's part of the job, Naruto. And if I remember correctly, you were the one who asked for the mission in the first place. It's your own fault we've been gone for a month and a half. As he stretched his arms, Sora said, give the kid a break, Kakashi-san. He's just finished his first A-rank mission. Naruto-kun even got a bridge named after him. I'd say either of those are a cause for celebration. Sakura rubbed her eyes and remarked, I'd say that's a good reason for a nap. You two have way too much energy. I guess it runs in the family, Sora chuckled. Sasuke whispered, it seems like being a fool also runs in the family. Naruto grumbled, damn it Sasuke, what is your problem? Sasuke snorted, but Sora spoke up before he could respond. The man rolled his eyes and said, you insult him just as much, Naruto-kun. At least he deserves it. Ignoring his comment, Sora sighed. Besides, didn't he save your life just a couple of weeks ago? I was fine. I could have handled Haku without that bastard, Naruto protested, folding his arms behind his head and closing his eyes. Yeah, right, exclaimed Sasuke. You wouldn't have lasted a minute without me there, scaredy.cat. Naruto shouted, shut up, Sasuke. Sora appeared to open his mouth to say something, but Kakashi waved him away. He rubbed his eyes and said, don't bother trying to talk sense into them, Sora-san. I've tried, adding that they would eventually come to their senses. Both boys pointed to one another and exclaimed, I'll never work with him, together. Sora said, right, with frustration, I hope you're correct, Kakashi-san. Sakura interrupted them just as they were ready to leave the tower and go their separate ways. Before we go, if you don't mind me asking, Uzumaki-san, why were you in Wave Country in the first place? You never did say. Sasuke gazed expectantly up at the man. Since he had been rendered unconscious during Sora's fight and had only been given a cursory account of what had transpired, he was also intrigued. However, he had heard that the red-haired man was far more powerful than he had claimed. However, it was Kakashi who responded rather than Sora. I never mentioned it on the way back. I sent a message for backup right after we ran into those Chunin on the way there. I also sent a few follow-ups after that. What? Exclaimed the three pupils. Kakashi gave a shrug. The mission was easily going to be a B rank, and it ended up turning into an A rank once Zabuza turned up. You didn't think I'd really just let you three walk into that without any backup plan, did you? Kakashi. Sensei, you almost make it sound like you can be responsible, eh? Sakura made a joke. Even Sasuke's lip twitched upward as Naruto snickered at the remark. Kakashi simply gave the three of them an eyebrow raise. Sora asked, "What did you expect? It's no wonder they're surprised, considering the way you act all the time." Kakashi simply gave a headshake. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Sora stated drearily, "Of course you don't, Kakashi-san." He turned back to his students and said, "Anyway," giving Sora a quick glance, "I asked for a jonin or two, just in case the situation got too dangerous. Turns out it was a good idea considering the mess we got thrown into. I didn't expect the third to send you though." Sora shrugged and remarked, "The third just dragged me into his office one day and sent me after you. Guess all the capable ninja were busy." "Probably," he replied, "it's too bad. If he'd sent Naomi-san instead, things probably would have gone much more smoothly." "You're hilarious, Kakashi-san." "I try." The two kept arguing for a while longer, and although Sasuke found the banter to be fairly easy, something felt strange. It seemed as though the discussion was a little rushed. He dismissed it, assuming it was all in his head. "Anyway, it's been a long mission, so you should all head back home for some rest," Kakashi stated. "I'll cancel practice for the rest of this week. Consider it a reward for not getting yourselves killed on your first A rank." Sakura started to creep toward Naruto as though she had a question for him as he cheered. Without saying anything, Sasuke simply snorted and pivoted on his heel before leaving. To avoid having to see anyone, he decided to go home via one of the more empty side streets, but after a few minutes, Sora showed up next to him, keeping up with him. Disregarding him, Sasuke intended to dismiss the man's remarks as he usually would. He waited while the minutes passed, but he grew irritated when Sora remained silent. "Is there a reason you're following me?" Sora smiled slightly, as though he had anticipated the inquiry. "There's a whole half of the village in this direction. Just because none of your teammates live in it doesn't mean that I can't." "HMPH. That doesn't explain why you have to walk next to me. I'm not interested in wasting my time talking to you. Go away." Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Sora shake his head, but the man didn't take offense. "Sometimes it's hard to believe someone like you and someone like Naruto-kun could be friends." "That's probably because we aren't friends," he whispered, "and didn't I already tell you to leave me alone?" Sora raised his eyebrows. "You knowingly sacrificed your life to protect him during that mission. You're only alive because Haku-kun didn't want to kill you." "I knew I'd be Finia. Eventually gave up trying to get the man to go," Sasuke said. "Besides, it was Naomi-san's advice that put me in that position. I tried to work Naruto and Sakura and all they did was slow me and Kakashi-sensei down." "Oh, so you're saying you could have defeated Haku-kun without Naruto-kun's help?" He replied, "Of course," but he couldn't disguise the hint of skepticism in his voice. Sora laughed. "Beneath all of the griping and negativity you really do care about your teammates, don't you?" He told himself, "I don't give a damn about those fools. If you really knew me, you'd know there's only one thing I care about." Sora simply acknowledged with a hum. Sasuke scowled. He wasn't sure if the man was already aware of Itachi. Considering that everyone knew about his brother's treachery, it wouldn't be shocking. There was silence for a few moments before Sasuke made the decision to ask a question that had been on his mind. "Why did you take my side over Naruto when we were arguing anyway?" "I didn't take your side, Sasuke-kun, I took my own. You were both being immature." "Still more than I would have expected. Shouldn't you support him because you're family?" "Just because I'm related to someone doesn't mean I'll agree with everything they say. Besides, I wouldn't really know how a family is supposed to work anyway." "Weren't you born into a powerful and well-respected clan?" Sasuke asked, casting a doubtful glance at him. Sora let out a slow breath. "My parents lived far away from the rest of the clan and were killed when I was young. Whirlpool was destroyed and my clan decimated a few years after that. My family was gone before I could even have one, so I've lived on my own for my entire life. The Uzumaki may not be dead, but they're certainly close. Naruto-kun is the first one I've come across in a very long time." His expression became more solemn, and I'd say I was the lucky one. "Fortunate." He pressed harder and shook his head. "What about your wife? Isn't she a part of your clan?" He remained silent for a while before responding. Naomi may have married me and took my last name, but it's not really the same as having a blood relative. He nodded. She did have her own clan though. Actually, of the two of us, she was the one who was born into a powerful clan. I'm sure you'd recognize the name if I told you. She even became the head of that clan after we were married. Sasuke frowned and said, shouldn't you two have stayed with them then? Even if she stepped down as a clan head, what reason could you two possibly have to leave them and come to Konoha? For several minutes, the man remained silent. Sora's voice was tight when he finally spoke, just when Sasuke thought the man had decided to keep quiet. By the time we left her, there was no clan for her to lead anymore. Unconsciously, Sasuke reduced his speed and stopped. Then her clan? Sora gave a nod. He put a hand on Sasuke's shoulder and sighed. I said I was the lucky one, didn't I? Look, Sasuke-kun. You can think whatever you want about Naomi and I, but trust me when I say we know what it's like to lead hard lives. Naomi-san told me they were too frail to defend their values on the day I met them. Sasuke wondered if this was part of her meaning. For a moment, as if thinking about something, Sora cocked his head to gaze up at the sky. But Naomi wasn't the only one to lose a clan, was she? So you do know. I try to keep myself informed and it's not as if it's much of a secret. He turned to look the child in the eye. Some advice for you. Sasuke-kun. Don't be so quick to throw your friends away. And I'm not talking about how trust is needed for teamwork or winning fights. It's just that even the strongest people need others to lean on sometimes. Someone to help you find your way when it seems like there's nothing left but darkness. He complained and shook Sora's hand away from him. I already told you they aren't my friends, he said. I will kill Itachi and restore my clan. It doesn't matter how dark that road is, I've already survived the worst life can give me. Daring the man to argue, Sasuke gave him a fierce look. To be the next to inform him that seeking revenge was not the best course of action. Rather, the man's face changed, as though a mask had been removed. He no longer exuded the easygoing, carefree vibe that Sasuke had grown to identify with Sora. He simply looked lost instead. It was the expression of someone who had lost everything and was at a loss for what to do. No, Sasuke-kun. You haven't seen the worst, not yet, he murmured. Something stopped Sasuke from rebuffing him and telling him he didn't understand. He recognized the expression on Sora's face from a previous encounter. In the weeks following the slaughter of his entire clan, he saw the same expression in the mirror. Even though Sora's claim was implausible, Sasuke harbored a suspicion that the man might be telling the truth. The dark expression vanished as swiftly as it had appeared, resuming its position behind Sora's typical expression. The individual nodded. I have seen and done far too much to lecture someone on whether revenge is right or wrong, Sasuke-kun. Even if I did, it's not like you would listen anyway. Still, you should keep in mind that vengeance and rebuilding your clan are two different things. You might have to choose which is more important to you someday. He paused. The idea that one of his objectives might conflict with the other had never really occurred to him. I can do both, determined Sasuke. In a whisper, Sora said, maybe, but life isn't usually that generous. Either way, it's your choice. It's not my place to make it for you. If it isn't your place to make my decisions, then why are you trying to give me advice? You barely know me. Why do you even care what I do? Yelled Sasuke as Sora started to slowly leave. With a melancholy grin, Sora said, you just remind me of an old friend, I guess. He went on to cross the street once more, waving a hand to disappear from view. As he made his way home, the boy shook his head and scoffed. Undoubtedly, the discussion had not proceeded as he had anticipated. Sasuke had been given understanding rather than sympathy or condemnation. Even though he would never acknowledge it, he valued being treated fairly, even though he still disagreed with some of what Sora had said. After all, it was rare to hear his objectives without denouncing them right away. He's almost as annoying as Naruto, but maybe he's not as much of an idiot as I thought. As he approached his apartment, Sora exhaled. He still wasn't certain if he had made the right decisions after the protracted mission. Right now, the only thing he was grateful for was the opportunity to talk to Naomi. Leaning against the doorframe to close his eyes and collect his thoughts, he walked inside and cautiously closed the door behind him. I probably shouldn't have spoken to Sasuke at all. Hinata would argue that I can just leave that moron since he has already shown himself to be unreliable and too obstinate to list. Sora opened his eyes and said, hey, I'm Ho. He froze when he saw the figure in front of him. Not her, shit. Leah gave a menacing growl. You're Ladia. Oh, hey there, random talking lion in my apartment. It's, nice to meet you. She screamed, I know who you are, Naomi, or Hinata, or whatever the hell her name is already explained everything. Ah, did she? Duh. That's great, it's nice to see you again, Leah. For the first time that Issa. You're late, she said again as she stalked in his direction. He tried to back away and said, I'm not sure what you mean, but then he realized that he was behind a wall. The lioness growled, I had to follow that crazy woman all the way back to Konoha. She told me you would be here when she got back. 2 weeks ago, after I finally thought I was free, you weren't here. For some reason she decided it would be fun to summon me every day for the past week and a half to keep her company. Her pupils widened, I don't do company. Well. Quiet, I have agreed to my pride's pact with Hinata. I will honor it and answer the call despite my misgivings. But let me make this clear. If I ever have to deal with this again, I will rip your arm off, human. Following a brief pause, Sora said, actually, you've tried that before. Leah gave a threatening smile. She said, oh, I doubt it, while gritting her teeth. After all, you still have both arms, don't you? Then she was gone, vanishing into thin air. Naomi called out, hey, Naruto, as she entered the room. I guess Leah left already? Too bad. She's as terrifying as ever, Sora remarked, a little chuckling. When Naomi said, oh don't be like that, she laughed. I think she's starting to like me already. She said she hated you. Naomi ignored it. She said she hated me for years the first time around anyway. It's better to just ignore it. She still threatened to rip my arm off, again. Technically, she actually took a swipe at you last time, even if she wasn't trying. At least I don't think she was trying. Naomi sighed. Anyway, she only threatened you this time, so I'd say it was a successful first meeting. But, she put her arms around his waist and urged him to relax. Anyway, welcome back. He looked at her. Something's wrong, isn't it? You know Leah's always been like this. That's not enough to make you look like that. He smirked half-heartedly and remarked, to be fair, she can be scary sometimes. Naomi simply gave him a hopeful glance. Am I that easy to read? Sora sighed. Just to me, she said, smiling and urging him. She led him to the living room by taking his hand and seated him on the couch before joining him. The mission. It could have gone better, he said, shaking his head. Her head rested against his shoulder. What happened? Well, to start, Kimimaro was there. With a frown, she asked, who? Remember the 4 guys some of us chased after when Sasuke left the village? The ones who almost killed Neji. Nissan? He replied, yeah. Kimimaro was their leader and he was way beyond any of the other 4. The guy would have killed me if Lee hadn't shown up. He would have killed Lee if Gaara hadn't saved him. And he would have killed them both if he hadn't died of some disease right before he could kill them. Ah. He was spying on my old team's fight. Knowing Orochimaru, he was probably under orders to keep an eye on Sasuke. I didn't want him to get away or spot me when I went in to try to stop anyone from getting killed. So I attacked him before I realized who he was. Sora put his hand over his face. I underestimated him. He was a lot stronger than I remembered, so he might not have been sick yet when I fought him. It was taking too long to beat him, so I blasted him onto the bridge with the others so I could keep Zabuza and Haku alive. I thought I could handle Ida, he continued. Naomi didn't say anything, giving him some time to collect his thoughts. He thought Sasuke had died and went berserk with some crazy technique to keep his existence a secret. Zabuza, he died protecting Haku. To regain his composure, Sora inhaled deeply. He almost killed Sakura, Hinata. I fractured my arm and ribs, just to use a wind burst long enough to reach them. Even then I had to use the Rasengan to take him down. The worst part of the absolute worst part was that there was Thisa this moment. The moment when I first saw the attack and I wasn't sure I was going to make Ida. He raised his head and stared at the ground. She was like a sister to me and I almost got her killed a decade before she died in our time. All because I was too busy worrying about hiding my abilities to go all out from the start. What the hell was I thinking? He screamed, clenching his fist. And then, after all of that, I still use one of the most recognizable techniques I know. Right in front of one of the 2 people who are supposed to be able to use it in this time. But she's alive, said Naomi in a low voice. Naruto turned to see her looking at him with intense interest and asked, what? She's alive and that's all that really matters, isn't it? My selfishness nearly got her killed though, and Zabuza. What could you have done? She said sharply, I know you. I know that if you'd had the chance, you would have saved Zabuza.san too. Besides, you know why ninja don't just throw out our strongest techniques at the beginning of every battle. To avoid showing their hands, to make sure they don't just charge into a trap, to always have an edge. In our case, that also includes being discreet about leaving clues to our identities. It would be better if we can avoid having all of Akatsuki trying to kill us or having every village try to hunt us down so they can get their hands on a technique that can literally send someone back in time. Kimimaro could have gotten away. There could have been another person watching that fight. Hell, Orochimaru will probably resurrect him to get information anyway. Naomi shook her head. No, you made the right choice. You only used the Rasengan when you had no other option. Naruto, you saved Sakura-san and Haku-san. Don't let your worries make you think the opposite. Sora remained silent for a while before responding. I know you're right. I know we have too much to lose to take too many chances. It's just I guess it never really sunk in that other people could get hurt until now. That our friends could die in ways we can't predict. I know, said Naomi, hugging him. No one ever said this would be easy. We just need to do the best we can and try to avoid dying along the way. But I'm worried about Orochimaru. Who knows what he'll do without one of his strongest fighters, Sora said, running a hand through his hair. You said Kimimaro was sick later on, right? Maybe it won't really make much of a difference. You were correct earlier. There is always a chance that Orochimaru will bring Kimimaro back to life in order to obtain information, but it might take some time for him to get ready or gather whatever someone uses to make the damn technique work. Hopefully I just wish I knew when Kimimaro actually got sick. Then there's Kakashi, Sora went on. He's already tried to confront me and I know there's no way he'll back down till he finds out the truth, even if he doesn't see us as enemies. We're two time travelers skilled at genjutsu and fuinjutsu, Naomi laughed. I'm pretty sure we can figure something out. Yeah. Sora shifted and began to stand up, but a hand at his sleeve stopped him. And where do you anticipate traveling? Did Naomi ask. To create additional seals for the apartment or perhaps have another conversation with the elderly man. I must be able to do something at this moment. I believe Sarutobi Sama will understand that Kakashi won't be breaking into our apartment anytime soon. Naomi reprimanded Naruto, saying, you should really take some time to relax. You were on that mission for a long time, I think you deserve a break. Sora insisted, I'll be fine, as she started to sag toward the door. He turned around and said, what are you, after hearing a sigh behind him and then feeling roughly a dozen quick taps on both of his arms. Sleep, Naomi muttered while making a hand gesture. Sora's chakra wasn't flowing correctly when he raised his hands to break the genjutsu. Gentle fist. His eyes drooped, and Sora grumbled, you cheater. If you aren't going to take care of yourself, then I guess I'll just have to do it instead. Sora experienced a sense of being lifted off his feet. Good night, she murmured. It was the final sound he heard before he eventually fell asleep. Not in any of the old bingo books either, huh? I suppose it was a stretch for them to be criminals. Kakashi sighed as he pulled another scroll to him. He had been in the library reading up on foreign ninja for the remainder of the day after the debriefing with the Hokage, but he had not yet discovered the slightest hint about Sora or Naomi's past. Kakashi shook his head. No, that's not something he could copy that easily, even with a Sharingan. It'd be nearly impossible for someone to teach him. I suppose he may have met Sensei at some point, but I don't think I've seen him wear a haori like the one Sensei used to wear a few times. Perhaps he idolized him and somehow copied the technique? Kakashi. He was startled out of his reverie when a voice asked. Surprised. He looked up from the scroll he had just opened to see Kurenai staring at him and saying, Yo. Are you reading something besides those ludicrous books Jiraiya-san wrote? She asked, raising an eyebrow at him. Irrational. The Icha Icha series is among the best pieces of art ever made, he said, frowning. True literature must not be appreciated by you. All right. So tell me, why are you here, and why are you in a library corner far away from other people? I fled when Guy noticed me entering, he said, rolling his eyes. He asked me to compete in a speed reading competition. A competition to read? Really? It's Gaia? After pausing, she shook her head and said, you got it. In any case, you have yet to respond to my initial query. Why are you here? What are you saying? I frequently visit this place. I come here all the time since I actually read real books, she sighed. Since I've known you, I've seen you here more times than I can count on one hand. Heck, even though Naomi-san has only been at the library for a few months, she has visited more than you have. You and she became friends rather quickly, didn't you? Kakashi laughed. Kurenai regarded him flatly, asking, is it really that surprising that almost everyone else I know is crazy? He grinned and said, I guess not. Besides, she likes to help me teach my students sometimes. She even agreed to help train Hinata personally every once in a while after the girl asked her a couple weeks ago, so she's already done more than enough to earn my respect. Have you witnessed her fight before? What? She has sparred lightly, but not seriously, as far as I can tell. Why? On the mission we just returned from, I witnessed Sora-san's first fight. I was curious about her because it was interesting. The only genjutsu I've ever witnessed her using is a small amount. Hold on, Kurenai said, gesturing with her hands. What sent Sora-san on your mission? It took some time, but wouldn't protecting a bridge builder or something have been a simpler C rank? Kakashi was coughing. Actually it might have turned into a B rank and then into a difficult A rank after that. Kurenai narrowed her eyes and said, Kakashi, you have to be kidding. Tell me you didn't send your new genin team on an A rank mission. With a sigh, Kakashi pushed his unread scroll aside and said, yes, I did. I assume that everyone made it back since you aren't getting yelled at by the third, Kurenai said, wiping a hand across her face. You are aware that you almost killed them? For the first time, Kakashi looked at her and said, I know. Kurenai swore and sat down at the table opposite him, resting her chin on her hands. Damn it, Kakashi, she said. We've been friends for a long time. I know you. You might act like an idiot for fun from time to time, but I know you take your job seriously. Your students even more so. What the hell happened? The client lied to us. Kakashi responded with a sigh. Some powerful shipping magnate was sending missing.nin after him. A couple of Chunin, the demon brothers, ambushed us on our way to Wave. I think I remember them from the bingo book, but that shouldn't have been much trouble for you. They weren't. I used the ambush to determine their target. I also took the chance to give my students some actual combat experience. Their first real fight against an enemy that won't hold back, but that I could still take down at any time. A bit cold I guess, but I'd have done the same thing. What did you say to the bridge builder? I threatened to leave right after he admitted lying to us. I probably should have, but Naruto wanted to stay. After that, Sasuke and Sakura agreed to keep going. Ikavada. He sighed. Wave was in really bad shape, Kurenai. If they didn't get that bridge, they weren't going to last another year. I didn't want to just leave them all to die. Besides, I knew the kids would probably end up taking the Chunin exams, so any experience in the field where I can keep an eye on them made them more likely to survive the tests. He massaged his temples. It was still a mid-level B rank at that point, and since I'm strong enough to take out any Chunin and most Jonin without any trouble, I didn't think it would be too difficult. I thought, who hires a missing.nin strong enough to fight me just to kill a simple bridge builder? Once we started moving again, I sent a few requests for backup on the way, just to be safe. Damn it, Kakashi, complained Kurenai. It's really hard to stay angry at you when you actually make sense. Yeah, I guess with you there, even if it's still a little dangerous, I can see your point. Especially considering the exams coming up and the state Wave was in. So what changed? The magnate that ordered the assassination had hired Zabuza. Damn. I guess that explains how it jumped up so high in rank, she said. Yeah. Long story short, the fight ended in a draw and I used my Sharingan so much that I was incapacitated for a few days. I couldn't just send my students back alone because I didn't know if there were any other surprises to worry about. We were backed into a wall and didn't have any choice but to beat Zabuza and his apprentice if we wanted to go home without abandoning the entire country. I see now. Sorry, Kakashi, it looks like I judged you too quickly. Don't apologize. I really did almost get everyone killed. There were a few times when he interrupted, as he held up a hand. He didn't want to consider how near losing Sakura and Sasuke had been for their team. Never mind. Anyway, if I thought things would get as bad as they did, I would have called for an ambush squad. We just got lucky. Kurenai scowled as if recalling something. You said you saw fight Sora-san, right? Did he come right before your second fight with Zabuza? Kakashi paused as he considered how to respond to the query. Whispering, summoning jutsu, he cut his hand and dropped it to the ground. A tiny pug emerged from behind a cloud of smoke that eventually dissipated. Pakun. Is there anyone else anywhere near here? After a few seconds of sniffing, the dog shook his head and said, no one. Keep a lookout and let me know if anyone starts getting close. Got it. Kurenai said. Kakashi. What's going on? We had one more issue during the mission. How many problems did this mission have, Kakashi? And why are you being so paranoid? Kurenai asked, raising an eyebrow. Kakashi paused for a moment before responding. We could have beaten Zabuza without Sora-san's help. The problem was that he caught someone spying on us and blew him right onto the battlefield near the end of our fight. The guy Sora-san found also turned out to be stronger than Zabuza and immediately started trying to kill everyone around him. Kurenai said, So let me get this straight, and shook her head. Right when you are about to kill one of the strongest ninja the mist has ever produced, an even stronger ninja shows up before you have any chance to recover? Technically Sora-san was there too. Right. And how exactly did you even begin to manage that? How are you not dead right now? I had my hands full just trying to keep my students alive, acknowledged Kakashi. Zabuza actually sacrificed himself to defend his apprentice, which was a surprise. Sora-san. Thought I was too busy to see that much of what he did, but watching him at the speed, the finesse, it was almost like watching Minato Sensei fight. You're not saying that his wind walking technique makes him as fast as the fourth, are you? No, the bursts he uses aren't instant, attested Kakashi. But they're fast. Near the end of the fight, the spy attacked Sakura. I couldn't reach her in time. Sora-san was 10 or 15 meters away. Yeah, I was sure she was gone, but then, before I could even begin to move, he was there, attacking the spy out of nowhere. Minato Sensei's Hiraiishin needed a seal or specialized kunai. Sora-san's technique didn't. If they switched placessa, I'm not certain if Minato Sensei could have saved her unless his seal was already set in advance. Kurenai remarked, that's hard to believe, I thought there were limits to that technique of his. I never saw him move that far when he sparred with Guy. There definitely are, Kakashi remarked as he combed through his hair. He actually fractured a few bones with that stunt and I'm sure it cost a large amount of chakra. It's definitely dangerous if you don't use it properly. If he hadn't been there thaw. Yeah. Sounds like it was tense. Kakashi gave nod. Wait, that's why you're here isn't it? You're trying to learn something about those two aren't you? Kurenai grinned at him. Weren't you the one that said it wasn't our place to dig into their past? Why are you doing this now? They haven't done anything but help us. You especially from the sound of that story. With a shrug, he said, I'm not suspicious of their motives if that's what you're thinking. I'm more curious than anything. He also added, without mentioning it, that Sora-san had used the Rasengan. Well, said Kurenai, forcing herself to stand up. Her tone was dry. You do that then. Enjoy stalking our friends, she said. I'm not stalking anyone. Whatever you say, Kakashi. Kurenai, there's one last thing I wanted to mention. She sighed. You're not going to tell me there was another complication with your mission are you? Kakashi looked away without responding. You're joking. How could it possibly get any worse? That spy we killed. He had a curse mark, which means Orochimaru was probably the one tracking us. Be careful from now on. After a few moments of silence, the woman finally responded. Kurenai rubbed her eyes slowly and said, the next time you tell me about one of your missions, Kakashi, could it be about something less stressful like your genin catching a cat or something? Kakashi laughed and opened another scroll as his friend left. I'll keep that in mind, he said. In the early morning darkness, Sora carefully examined the forest clearing. After 15 minutes of trying, he was still only able to get a glimpse of Naomi. Sora had made the decision to speed up his Byakugan training after almost missing Kimimaro's appearance in Wave. He understood that if he couldn't trust himself to notice the crucial details when they mattered, then relying on his improved vision would be more of a liability than anything else. There seemed to be a voice saying, don't treat it like normal eyesight, coming from all sides. It's about how much you can ignore, not how much you can see. Find and distinguish what's important, then shut out everything else. The echoes suddenly stopped, leaving only a single voice whispering from directly behind him. But most importantly, he said, never forget to watch your back. Sora turned around, startled, and saw Naomi thrusting a palm at him with a sly smile. He raised his arm just in time to block her attack, but there's no why how did I miss her? Even though the training Naomi had given him over the past month had not been particularly easy, it had been manageable that is, until Naomi had decided to teach him the fundamentals of the gentle fist and then made him practice sparring without using any of his other techniques. Unfortunately, he had learned that he was not very good at differentiating tenketsu or the actual style itself. As Naomi started to launch backwards, he kicked out at her, feeling his foot briefly touch her before it unexpectedly went straight through her. Take a closer look. Use the Byakugan to identify the subtle differences that always exist between what is real and what is genjutsu. Behind him, another voice called. It's no wonder I didn't see her get behind me damn, I should have known. As the illusion faded away, Sora recalled that the benefit of using genjutsu to create illusory copies rather than shadow clones was that the caster could make the copies seem to be anywhere rather than having to generate them beside the original. And if the genjutsu user was skilled enough, they could make their enemy feel the impact of their attacks against the illusion and have that same illusion react accordingly, fooling their enemy into thinking they were attacking their opponent instead of a simple copy. The only real drawback was that maintaining a genjutsu that precise required a great deal of concentration, which limited the complexity and strength of the user's other attacks and made it easy to disrupt if someone attacked the genjutsu user themselves. Unfortunately, that wasn't very helpful when Sora didn't even know where his opponent was. "Oh, hurry up!" Sora turned to see a huge ball of fire rushing in his direction. As the flames rushed past him, he flung himself to the side, feeling the searing heat, and then the attack vanished, leaving nothing behind. He started searching the clearing frantically, thinking, "Again?" Sora saw a flicker in his vision and looked up to see his wife falling in his direction. "Good," she smiled, "you're beginning to understand." As Naomi approached, he lifted his arms in self-defense. 8 trigramza, she muttered. "What a waste." "Well, it was enjoyable." As they slowly returned to the village, Naomi chirped. As he plodded on, Sora cast a sidelong glance at his wife and said, "You're having fun, aren't you?" "Maybe just a little bit." Naomi gave him a smile, adding, "It's kind of nice to see you have to struggle to learn something for a change." He looked down at her. "No offense," she hurriedly added, "it's just that well, I suppose it just makes things seem more normal. As if we were 2 ordinary ninjas training for everyday tasks." "Perhaps," he grimaced. "However, don't you think that struggling is a bit of an understatement? I hardly know how to perform any of the moves correctly, much less manage my chakra well enough to land a tenketsu when I do." "Please, Naruto," Naomi said with a scowl. "We've only been at this for a month, the first half of which was spent with me showing you basic moves and hitting each of your tenketsu one by Oniya." He muttered, "Don't remind me, that was so boring." "So you could get an idea of the effect each individual attack has on your opponent," she concluded without missing a beat. "You should be proud of the progress you're making when you consider that you're still learning how to move and fight with your Byakugan active rather than just looking at things. Remember, this is how things work when a huge group of shadow clones can't simply teach you something." Sighing, Sora didn't argue, but she had a point, and the times when that method didn't work could be a little startling because Sora and his friends had grown so used to the absurd speed at which he could learn something when he used shadow clones. It was an ideal example of learning a new fighting style. When Sora was trying to learn or create a ninjutsu, it was relatively easy to use shadow clones, so he could just brute force his way to mastery because the technique either worked or it didn't. However, something like taijutsu was a whole other story, with a variety of sloppy ways to use a taijutsu style and generally only one efficient and correct way to use it. As a result, Sora had rapidly realized over the years that using shadow clones to learn taijutsu, among other things, was more likely to teach him the wrong technique than to teach him what he was actually supposed to be doing. As a result of this lesson, Sora had not anticipated learning the gentle fist in a day. His training to learn how to use his combat knives had been similar for years prior, but he had not anticipated it to be this challenging. The fact that the style necessitated total chakra control and precision only made learning it more challenging, and at times it was a humbling experience. "I guess you have a point," he finally said, "but I'm not sure if I'm suited to use the gentle fist. I doubt I'll ever be able to master it, even if I am." "The Byakugan is hard enough," Sora said, massaging his temples to relieve the dull headache that the conversation had brought back to him. Although he was gradually improving his ability to use his left eye, the experience was still unpleasant because, even though he was doing much better than he had the first few times, the Byakugan's enormous increase in perception still made him feel a little queasy and like his head was going to burst open, and this feeling was only exacerbated when he attempted to move or fight simultaneously. Even if the headaches disappeared as Naomi had promised, he doubted he would ever be able to become truly comfortable using the eye because there was something unsettling about being able to see in all directions at once that he couldn't shake off. "The Byakugan simply requires experience, as I have stated previously." She turned her gaze to him to underline that she was doing just that right now. "Eventually, you'll get used to it to the point where you can move, talk, and keep an eye on your surroundings at the same time," she promised. To illustrate her point, Naomi raised her hand and created a swirling ball of energy in her palm. As for the gentle fist, she added, "Even if you don't master it, it can't hurt to learn whatever you can. You never know what will happen in a battle. Even the slightest edge can save your life," Naomi said, recalling what you said when you taught me this. "It's been true more than once," she said, allowing the technique to fade. "You can learn the gentle fist if I can learn the Rasengan." With an appreciative smile, he turned to face her and said, "Sometimes I worry that you put too much faith in me." With a quiet laugh, she said, "Well, I haven't been wrong yet, so I'll take my chances." He grinned broadly and said, "Anyway, how is your training going?" Naomi gave him a curious look. "With Hinata, that is." "You meant that, I see. You know, I've only worked with her a couple of times." Her true teacher is Kurenai. Sensei, not me. She sighed, the whole thing is strange enough to handle already. But is it beneficial? I think so, said Naomi, biting her lip as she thought about how to respond. I've been working with her a little on some of the basics of genjutsu and I'm trying to show her some ninjutsu too, though that's not really my strong suit, she ultimately said. Given that I'm not supposed to know the gentle fist, taijutsu is more difficult. I dismiss it as something I am unable to assist her with. Kurenai. Sensei seems to believe it's helping her, but I honestly don't think I'm doing all that much. All I really want is for Hinata to become a little more self-assured. It doesn't really matter if I teach her anything useful or not if I can accomplish that. Why? She asked, glancing at Sora. Are you considering taking the same action? I don't think so, he said, shaking his head. Jiraiya. Sensei will arrive soon, and Naruto already has Kakashi. Sensei, so I doubt he needs a third party teaching him something new at this time. Especially since anything I could teach him would either cause suspicions or take too long to learn. Sora trailed off as an idea occurred to him, then laughed. I'll just watch over him and assist when he needs it. Scowling, Naomi said, what is it? Nothing, she was assured. It's just that funny how confusing it can be talk about them. Are we beginning to struggle to distinguish me from a 12-year-old? Naomi made fun of it. Ha, Sora said, rolling his eyes. Ha. You understand what I mean. Simply put, it's strange. Discussing our younger selves as though they were distinct individuals. Well, kind of, Naomi said, closing her eyes and grinning a little. They're different people, she said. However, I get it. I never would have imagined having a real talk with myself prior to this mess. The two decided to train so far from the village that they still had time to get to the gates, so they let the subject fall as they walked in friendly silence for the next few minutes. So, do you really want to attend this meeting? As they started to approach the entrance, Sora said, you don't have to come if you don't want to. You mean I'm not sure I'll see my dad? She shook her head, saying, I'll be alright, Naruto. It was just the first time that really affected me. He looked at her for a few seconds, then nodded and said, I guess it's better if you come anyway. He raised his hands to his head and said, you've always been better than me at dealing with keeping secrets and avoiding suspicion. He grimaced, but he went on, speaking of suspicion, you're sure your dad won't see through our transformations, right? Good. We don't have our Byakugan running all the time. As it is, my clan generally refrains from using them in public to respect the privacy of the villagers. In the Tower of the Hokage, using them, no one would even put up with that. It's simply too likely that one of us will discover a secret that we shouldn't. My father shouldn't pose much of a threat without his Byakugan. At least that's a relief. But don't think that means he'll just trust us, she said with a sly smile. In comparison to when you first met him a few years ago, he is now even more obstinate and inflexible. Was he worse? Sora questioned doubtfully. He wasn't worse, in my opinion. I guess he was just, well, colder, farther away. My mother's passing was difficult for him, but he didn't fully isolate himself and devote himself to running the Hyuga's affairs until my uncle passed away. After the Chunin exams, he did begin to change, but I was never really able to determine why. Neji. Nissan informed me that he had a conversation with my father soon after his match, so I guess Naomi paused and grinned to herself, and I'm getting ahead of myself now. I apologize, I've always wanted to know. In any case, the point is that, even though you shouldn't be concerned, you should still maintain your composure by it. She interrupted herself with a frown. After a few moments of staring at her, Sora moaned as she kept her gaze fixed on the village. Isn't it them again? As Naomi nodded, her scowl grew. A few ninja wearing Enbu masks are lurking around the village entrance. As usual, I believe they're the same ones. Damn, he cursed, you'd think that by now they'd be sick of learning nothing new. How in the world is Danzo unable to leave us alone? Naomi reminded him, powerful people notice when you go and help kill one of the 7 swordsmen and a spy for Orochimaru, Naruto. They would try to find us every day if they knew anything significant, so just be glad they don't. He sighed and said, that doesn't mean it's not annoying and an unnecessary risk. At least this time they didn't try to find us before we left for training. When we see the old man, I suppose I'll just ask him about it. Naomi concurred, I suppose it can't hurt. Then Naomi let go of her Byakugan and they entered the clearing around the village entrance, where they hurriedly greeted the village guards and proceeded toward the Hokage's tower, being careful to keep an eye out for anyone who might be pursuing them. Oh, there's Kurenai-san over there, Naomi said abruptly. I'll go say hello. Why don't you continue? The time should not be too long. Sora said, sure, I'll see you at the tower. He stopped and watched as Naomi approached to greet her old teacher, grinned at the sight, and went on. Kurenai pursed her lips as she thought about the current page of her notebook. Should I lace the illusion into sound? No, that could backfire on allies too easily, she thought. A voice said, "Hi there, Kurenai-san," abruptly cutting in. Kurenai looked up from the little book she was writing in and said, "Oh, hey Naomi-san," before closing it after taking a few more notes. "I didn't expect to run into you anytime soon," Kurenai said. "You usually leave to train at this time, don't you?" She clarified, "Sora and I finished up a little early because we had some business to attend to at the tower. What do you have there?" Kurenai brightened and extended her notebook so her friend could see it better. "I suppose you could call it a hobby. I occasionally come up with intriguing concepts for new genjutsu that I might be able to create, so I jot them down and attempt to figure them out in my free time. It doesn't always work out," she shrugged, "but occasionally I can piece something together that works." "Oh, I see. It sounds like a lot of fun. When it works, it can be, but it can get really frustrating," Kurenai laughed. "In fact, are you willing to look? It's not often that I get the chance to talk high-level genjutsu theory with someone," she said, passing the notebook to the woman. Naomi smiled and accepted the offered book, saying, "My teacher always said it was an underappreciated art. Now let me take a look." Naomi started to turn the pages, saying, "Not bad ah. This one looks promising, let's see here." She halted abruptly and gazed at a single page. Kurenai scowled. "What's the matter?" she asked, coming around to look over Naomi's shoulder. "Oh, that one. I keep thinking about it because it's such an intriguing idea, even though I'm still not sure if it's even feasible. I doubt I'd ever use something like that, so it's not really important." Naomi said nothing. Kurenai gave her a worried look and asked, "Are you okay?" "I apologize, I'm fine," said Naomi, shaking her head. She smiled and handed the book back, saying, "I think some of these ideas look really promising. Maybe we can work together on a couple. I just blanked out for a moment is all." "That would be nice. Hey, would you like Toa, if you're free later?" "See you in a while." Kurenai extended her hand and said, "Hey, hold on a minute." The woman hurried away, and she trailed off, watching in vain as she said, "Okay. Well, bye I guess." With a shrug, she reopened her book. As she walked toward the Hokage's tower, Naomi forced herself to maintain a steady pace. When she reached her destination, she nodded curtly as she passed the door guards and then went straight to find a quiet place. When she came to an empty hallway, she leaned against the closest wall, closed her eyes, and released the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding in. "So you'd been playing with that idea for that long, sensei?" she said, bowing her head. Unexpectedly, a series of pictures started to race through her head: chaos, violence, terror, so much death. As she frantically tried to push the memories away, she wiped a hand across her face. "Get a grip, Hinata," Naomi reprimanded herself. "You've already moved past this, remember?" It took a few moments, but at last Naomi managed to calm her nerves and gather herself. It had been a long time since she had given herself permission to think more than a fleeting thought about what had happened that day, and even though she no longer felt guilty about it, it was not a time she enjoyed thinking about. She sighed deeply and pushed herself off the wall, not wanting to think about the past, and not having the time. Naomi took a few more moments to gather herself before leaving the deserted corridor and walked quickly through the tower, avoiding any guests or employees as she made her way to the upper floors, pausing briefly to chat with the receptionist as she arrived at the Hokage's office. "Welcome, Naomi-san," Sarutobi said, reactivating the privacy seals on his office as she entered after the receptionist announced her presence. As for Sora, he was leaning against one of the office's walls with his arms folded and a huge smile plastered on his face, which, based on Naomi's experience, meant that either something good had happened or that her husband was about to give her a headache. The Hokage smiled kindly from behind his desk and appeared to be in a generally good mood, despite the topic of the meeting that was scheduled to take place in an hour. "Hokage Sama," she raised her head, "I apologize for taking so long." The man laughed and waved away her worries, saying, "It's all right, and with me, there's definitely no need for such formality," he continued. "Old habits. You can thank my father for that." The corner of her mouth lifted. He paused as they looked at each other. "Anyway, you got here just in time," Sora interrupted. "The old man was just saying that. I just saw something I didn't expect to," she said, shaking her head. "It's nothing to worry about," she reassured him. He scowled but didn't ask her any more questions. "I was just telling him that I'm promoting the two of you to Chunin, effective immediately," the Hokage said, clearing his throat. It's been long enough that promoting you two past genin won't cause any issues, but your probationary status will continue until shortly after the chunin exams are over. In addition, I came to the conclusion that you two ought to be promoted above your current positions. With a noticeable smile, Sora said, "Isn't it fantastic? At last, we can be chunin." Naomi couldn't contain her laughter as she said, "That's nice, Naruto." At that, he became deflated and said, "Are you not excited?" "Well, considering the fact that I ran the closest thing we had to Anbu until we came back in time and also that I passed the chunin exams over 10 years ago." She rested her chin on the table. "No, not really." "Well, I'm happy about it at least," he complained ruefully. "And I'm glad you're pleased that you're getting promoted past genin at last. You took too long," she teasingly said. Naomi saw Sarutobi raising an eyebrow and giving her a questioning look. "Anbu, did you say? Even a leader? I understand how your skill set would make you a clear choice, but that still seems," he thought. "Not like me." Naomi smiled, shaking her head. "It is. Not the Anbu you know, but the closest we had was the one I led. We accomplished similar missions, but things are much less gray than they would be for the Anbu of this era when everyone you kill or destroy is supporting the group that seeks to wipe out humanity. Furthermore, when I initially assumed command, there were a few individuals in charge of different special ops groups, so I wasn't always alone," she continued. "However, as time went on and some of the leaders were killed, the groups came together." She shrugged. "It wasn't the best way to get a promotion, but I did the best I could. One day, I was the last person left, and everyone was looking to me for direction, so I kind of just took charge of anyone who was left. Since you know the Anbu, I don't think I'd be a very good addition. I'm not really the Anbu type, even though I might have the talent. Anyway," she said, "that's enough about me. I'm assuming you didn't call us here solely for the sake of a simple promotion." He confirmed, indeed, as he leaned forward to look at Sora. "But first, I believe Sora-san was about to ask me something before you came in?" After giving a nod, Sora turned to look at Naomi. "I was going to ask him about Danzo," he clarified. She recalled, "Ah, you did say you wanted to ask about him." Sarutobi rubbed his eyes and paused to light his pipe and get ready. "I'd feared as much. He's finally started to give you trouble, has he?" "Wait, you knew this would happen?" Sora asked him, looking at him bewildered. "I know Danzo," admitted Sarutobi. "Though I neglected to tell you, I've been masking your importance from him since you arrived. You were bound to catch his attention sooner or later, however." Hiruzen took a moment to look every two together. "Now that Danzo has taken an interest in you both, you must be cautious. In his eyes you are unknowns. Either potential tools to exploit or enemies to rid himself of. So there's nothing else you can do about him then, Hokage Sama?" asked Naomi. With a grim smile, the Hokage said, "Beyond killing him? I'm afraid not, Naomi-san." Sora laughed. "From what I know about that bastard, you should have killed him years ago, old man. I'm surprised he hasn't tried to kill you yet." When Hiruzen said, "Oh, he has tried. A few times actually," he laughed. "I thought you knew that already." "What the hell? Old man, you can't be serious. I know you try to avoid killing, but how can you just laugh something like off?" Sora said, staring at the Hokage in disbelief. The man acknowledged, "The situation is complicated. Complicated enough to let him try to kill you multiple times? Just kill him," Sora persisted. "Hell, I'll kill him if you want me to, but don't just let him get away with something like this." The Hokage looked at them both, clearly indicating that there was no room for discussion. "Do not take me for a soft-hearted fool, Naruto. If circumstances allowed it, Danzo would either be imprisoned or dead by now. I am not naïve enough to think he deserves any more chances." Hiruzen breathed a sigh of relief. "You may have led an army, but you have a long way to go before you understand how best to lead a village full of people with differing agendas." Naomi murmured, "It sounds a little like clan politics. The Hyuga had other concerns by the time I was in charge, but infighting was a constant problem that my father was forced to deal with. Konoha can be much the same, according to Hiruzen. How can I best explain this? You see, Danzo was one of my best friends and, even after I became Hokage, he was one of my most trusted advisors. In retrospect, though, he became too trusted. In the years following my appointment, Danzo somehow changed. He became more ruthless and colder, and he became obsessed with bolstering Konoha at all costs. During that period, he made a number of dubious choices, which I ignored because I thought he was still the person I had been friends with. But I didn't realize how far he'd fallen until he ordered Itachi to kill the entire Uchiha clan behind my back. I ordered the disbandment of his root division because I had completely lost faith in him. But based on what little I know about his present activities, it seems that he has continued to run the group in spite of my directives. You two must have encountered them at some point, don't you? Sora gave a nod. I'm not shocked. In any case, Danzo is now without a doubt the second most powerful person in this village, at least politically, in part because I put up with him for far too long and in part because there are many other people who agree with him about how to best build the village. He's too firmly established now for me to just have him taken out. Because of this, it has become very challenging to decide how to handle him. But none of this really concerns either of you, the Hokage said, pausing to take a long drag from his pipe. He shook his head, glancing at Sora's gloomy face, and said, "Don't worry, Sora-san. Danzo is my problem, not yours." Even though Danzo is capable of horrible things, he genuinely wants to improve the village. The old fool is so arrogant that he finds it impossible to believe that, except for the hardliners, the majority of the village would not follow him even if he were elected Hokage. To be honest, Danzo poses a greater threat to me than to the village as a whole. That doesn't really make me feel any better, old man. Unfortunately, it's the best I can do. Still, I'll do everything in my power to keep him out of your affairs. However, as I previously stated, please exercise caution. I'd prefer not to find out if I'm right, but I doubt he'll do anything that extreme against you. He was told by Naomi, "We understand." "Good," the Hokage said, nodding. "Now, before we discuss why I wanted to talk to you two, is there anything else you both would like to know?" Both of them remained silent. "Very well," Hiruzen said, putting his fingers together and closely examining the pair. "You see, you've given me a lot of information about my former pupil's plans over the past month. I can't express how much you two have helped me with this, but if it's feasible, I'd still like to know even more. In light of this, I came to the conclusion that although we have talked extensively about the impending invasion, we haven't spent much time going into detail about Orochimaru's actions during the actual exams other than a few generalities. Before our meeting with the others starts, I thought it would be best to inquire about this." Sora gazed at the ceiling. "Yeah," he sighed, "I was going to bring that up earlier, but I kept putting it off because what little I know doesn't really affect the invasion." "What happened?" the Hokage asked, raising an eyebrow. "In a nutshell, Orochimaru ambushed my team in the Forest of Death during the second section of the exam. I believe it was done to test Sasuke, but I'm not positive." At the worried expression on the third's face, he remarked, "We all survived, but Orochimaru still managed to put a cursed seal on Sasuke." Sarutobi's face widened. "And from your expression I'm guessing that Sasuke-kun will make a different choice than Enko-san did. A couple months after the invasion he nearly killed Naruto and joined Orochimaru," Naomi said. "The idiot thought it would improve his chances of getting revenge on his brother." "Sasuke had no intention of killing me. If he was, I would have passed away at that very moment," Sora objected. "That doesn't excuse her." Naomi bit back her words as the Hokage nodded for Sora to continue, and he held up a hand to stop the argument. "Anyway," Sora went on, "the solution is simple. I will simply prevent Orochimaru from ever sealing Sasuke in the first place. The issue has been resolved. I've already come up with some ideas." As Sora continued to explain his plan, Naomi listened. To be honest, she had been anticipating this exact behavior from her husband for a while. At the time of their first return to the past, she might have agreed with him, but the more she thought about it, the more convinced she became that protecting Sasuke during the exam was a mistake. Naomi steeled herself. "No," she shook her head and interrupted. "What?" Sora turned to face her, perplexed. "It's a mistake," she insisted, saving Sasuke. "What do you mean, it's a mistake?" he asked her, his mouth hanging open. "I meant precisely what I said," Naomi said, squinting her eyes. "Preventing Sasuke from being cursed with a seal? It's an error." How on earth did you think that? Is it because you believe that excessive interference is dangerous?" Sora spluttered. "It's not like Orochimaru actually used the seal during the invasion, so I know that preventing him from doing so is going a long way. I am aware of that. Furthermore, we can no longer be sure of anything because you killed Kimimaro already. So what? You don't believe that taking away his choices is wrong? Do you really think I'm naive enough to care whether or not forcing people to make stupid choices is morally right after all we've been through?" she sneered. "So why do you want to put our friend through that?" he demanded. "Because he poses a threat," she shouted. "You're not being fair, even though I know you never fully trusted him after he returned. I am being practical. He sacrificed both of his eyes to keep me alive. After attempting to murder you, and consider this, the end of the world was all that was required for him to realize his mistake. How can you not see it, Naruto?" she said with a laugh that was devoid of humor. Regardless of your opinion, Sasuke-kun has demonstrated that he would be happy to turn on us for any chance that would enable him to murder his brother. Sora gritted her teeth and said, he deserves a chance to prove himself, in order to prevent any mistakes he might make. The ones he himself admitted to me he would later regret. And I'd like to give him that opportunity. You're right. I don't and never will have complete faith in Sasuke-kun. Don't get me wrong, Naruto, I don't want Sasuke-kun to experience that again. I simply won't act like he's no longer a threat. Do you really believe that all of his issues would be resolved if you shielded him from Orochimaru? Why didn't Madara entice him earlier this time? Or, really, anybody else? No, it is necessary to force Sasuke-kun to make a decision. We can't truly trust his intentions otherwise, not because I believe it will improve him as a person or that it's the moral thing to do. The Hokage interrupted before Sora could reply, saying, she has a point, Naruto, before referring to Sora by her given name. You can't possibly agree with her, old man, Sora said, turning to face him. We can't simply leave Sasuke. Hinata.san is by no means advocating that you leave Sasuke-kun. Based on what I've heard, Sasuke-kun might benefit more in the long run from facing his demon's head on rather than being shielded from having to make a decision at all. Sora raged in silence, and just as he opened his mouth to say something else, the Hokage's door was knocked on. Everyone put on a neutral mask, and the whole atmosphere of the room changed, making it seem to an outsider that there had never been any argument at all. Sora glanced at her, then he mouthed and turned to face the door. A man entered through the open door, his eyes closed as he suppressed a yawn. Are you ready, Hiruzen? When Shikaku opened his eyes, he was startled to see Sora and Naomi. I feel like this is going to be more troublesome than usual, he said. The man's expression instantly changed, and a cunning smile appeared on his face as his eyes appeared to sharpen into a coldly calculating look. Well, it looks like you were holding out on me, Hiruzen. Perhaps this won't be as dull as I had anticipated. As the others started filing out of the room, Shikaku took a moment to unwind in his chair. Overall, the meeting had gone about as smoothly as could be anticipated. Some of the more hawkish members had insisted that the leaf attack the sand and burn the village to the ground right away, and there was general skepticism toward the two Chunin who had allegedly first discovered the information. They also expressed confusion and fear that the village would soon be attacked during the Chunin exam. But when you think about it, things could have gone worse. Although it might limit their capacity to prepare, the Hokage was correct to keep the meeting small because any plans they did make were unlikely to be leaked. His wife had left moments earlier, so Sora was the last to depart. He paused to gaze at the commander standing in the doorway, seemingly sensing Shikaku's interest. Sora, called Naomi, we're going to be late, so hurry up. I'm coming, Sora told them. After giving Shikaku one last look, the man walked away. Sarutobi started compiling different documents and reports. So? He inquired. So what? You always have something to say. I imagine today is no different. Shikaku's mouth twitched up in amusement at the corner. Even if everything goes smoothly and we win, this is going to be a huge mess. Helpful as always, I see. He clarified, I'm only stating the obvious. After cleaning his desk, Sarutobi sighed and looked directly into Shikaku's eyes. I know. You know that wasn't all I was asking about though. You mean the two new ninja you led into the village and whose paperwork you forged? Hiruzen, to his credit, didn't even try to refute it. Indeed, it's likely that he had anticipated Shikaku learning that much. The Hokage arched an eager eyebrow. Shrugged, I'm the Jonin commander. I make it my business to keep track of any shinobi in the village. Especially when my Hokage first describes them as the two who managed to put all my guards under a genjutsu, place a seal over my office and would have been the strongest assassins I'd have faced in years if they'd attacked me. Fair enough. I assume you corrected whatever holes you found in the Uzumaki's paper trail? Of course, said Shikaku. I'm the only one who noticed anything was wrong with it. Good. Thank you, Shikaku. Please keep an eye out to make sure it stays that way. As for their entrance, of sorts, just be glad that it was someone friendly who exposed holes in our security. That's the issue though, Hiruzen. How can you be so sure those two are friends of the village? Hell, if you had mentioned those details to anyone else who came to this meeting, there would have been calls for imprisonment at the very least. Which is one of the reasons why you're the only person I've told. Even if I hadn't, we both know you'd have come to me asking about them for some reason or another. Probably, said Shikaku, but that still doesn't answer my question. Why do you trust them? I know you. You wouldn't forge documents and streamline the immigration process for someone who's just broken into your office. You aren't that trusting. Technically, they didn't break into my office. Shikaku looked at him. The elderly man forced himself to get up from his chair and looked out the window at the village below. It's not every day an S-class ninja asks to join your village with no strings attached. That day I got 2. I made an exception. S-class? Shikaku nodded. It doesn't matter. I'll take your word for it. Anyway, that's because that never happens. Someone like that comes along, there's always a catch. Besides, even if there wasn't, them being stronger should make you more cautious, not generous. And that's not even taking into consideration whatever connection they had with Orochimaru that let them conveniently discover invasion plans. You don't honestly think that explanation will be enough to convince me, do you? Sarutobi turned to face the ghost of a smile. I suppose not, but you can't blame me for trying, can you? Still, you never really answered my question. Tell me, what was your impression of those 2? Shikaku gave him careful thought. Strong, he finally said. I could tell that much even before you said they were S-class. Clever and hard to read too, the woman especially. Except for one thing. It was just a feeling, so I don't think anyone else noticed, but something about the way she seemed to look at Heishi during the meeting still seems off to me. I just can't pin down exactly what it was anyway. There's something different about those 2, Hiruzen. I can tell that much, even without you giving me the specifics. The others suspect something too, they have to. You've put so much trust in them so quickly that it's almost painfully obvious there's a secret you're hiding. Having the correct paperwork won't solve that. The Hokage appeared to pause for a moment before responding, and to your earlier question, Shikaku. Well, I must admit I can't explain my exact reasons for trusting them. Not right now, before shaking his head. I know, but I can't see much of a way to avoid that. Suffice it to say though, that there truly aren't any conditions attached to their help. We both can trust them. I'd stake the future of the village on it. The response surprised Shikaku. He reasoned that since Hiruzen had used such strong language, whatever justification he was trying to hide from me must be very compelling. Then he realized something, and a sinking, cold feeling settled in his gut. That it wasn't just a figure of speech, was it? Hiruzen looked back out the window and turned away. Orochimaru's attack on the villagia, tell me the truth, Hiruzen, is that even the main threat we have to worry about? Sarutobi remained silent once more. Shikaku muttered a curse. Of course not. What happened to living out your twilight years in peace? Just how many more crises are you planning on making me deal with, old man? The Hokage laughed sheepishly. I apologize that you'll be forced to do some actual work, Shikaku. Just try to focus on the invasion for now. After that, you'll have plenty of time to worry about the future. Right. I'll make sure the correct preparations are made. I'm not certain exactly how much I can get done without drawing any attention, but I'll do what I can. Shikaku started to walk away, but he stopped in front of the door after having an epiphany. Hiruzen, is what he said. You said I'll have time to worry about the future after the invasion, don't you mean we? After an anxious minute of silence, the Hokage finally said, goodbye, Shikaku. Don't forget to keep me updated. After giving a nod, Shikaku eventually walked out of the room, gently shutting the door behind him. This is going to be such a pain, he mumbled, letting out a sigh. The man started walking in the direction of his office. He thought about looking into the Uzumakis himself, but he soon put the thought out of his mind. The least Shikaku could do was give Sora and Naomi some space if Hiruzen had that much faith in them. For now, at least, he would keep the 2 secrets to himself. Besides, Shikaku had no time to sat his curiosity now. He needed to make plans if a battle was imminent. As the wind gradually started to encircle Asuma's knife, Kakashi observed the man's intensely focused expression. Don't try to hold it there, Sora said. You won't be able to control it very well. Just use your chakra to guide the wind onto the blade, then release it towards target. A huge gash was left where the attack had struck when Asuma slashed his blade, releasing the pent-up wind and sending it outward and into a nearby tree. With a smile, Sora said, not bad for a first try. With a frown, Asuma said, that was surprisingly easy. Sora pulled out one of his own knives and directed a little wind around it. I know, right? Everyone is always so focused on either ignoring wind completely and just channeling chakra into a blade, or struggling to control it enough for them to be able to blast huge gusts of wind at their opponent. Both have their uses, but people rarely think to try something in the middle. Give the wind a little push to help direct its path, without trying to control it fully. For this sort of thing, chakra blades are about the best anyone can manage in a real fight, but you'd be surprised how useful this one technique can be. I'd never thought about trying to work with wind chakra that way, said Asuma, but it makes sense. I guess it's not that surprising there's so little diversity among wind techniques though. Since there are barely any ninja with the affinity in the first place, there aren't that many people to experiment with it. Well, not that many who would share what they've learned at least, he continued. Actually, before you moved into Konoha, I didn't even know anyone else in the village who had it. Really? Inquired Sora. Who taught you then? No one. I just used some of the older scrolls in the library for the basics and taught myself the rest. Sora paused and appeared to get a distant look in his eyes before saying, the same as me then. The man turned back to Asuma and said, well, almost the same. Someone did give me a short lesson when I first learned my affinity. Anyway, I'm honored to help. Asuma-san. It's the least I can do. Was there anything else you were curious about? You've helped me more than enough, Sora-san, Asuma laughed. Unless of course you wanted to teach me that ridiculous wind movement technique of yours. After a moment of reflection, Sora shrugged helplessly and said, I don't think I could teach it to you even if I wanted to. Even Naomi only sort of understands it and I've tried to explain it to her a bunch of times. Then a gust of wind blew past them at once, and in an instant, Sora had moved a meter to the side. He tried, you just sort of ride the wind? Asuma raised her hand. Relax, I was just joking. I'm happy that you were generous enough to show me what you already have. Generous, huh? Sora shifted her voice. I'd almost forgotten how it was. Kakashi scowled. But it's always been that way. The majority of people, even those in the leaf, have always been cautious when disclosing their more sophisticated methods. Well, if you ever want to talk technique again, just let me know. That's the best thing about the wind nature, Sora said with a hand raised. You can pull off almost anything you can think of, so long as you have the control and chakra reserves to handle it. Around them, a light wind started to blow. The wind changed direction, heading toward Sora. Asuma blew a whistle. Damn. Upon closer inspection, Kakashi saw that the air appeared to adhere to Sora's hand like a second skin. A few seconds later, Sora exhaled deeply, and the wind blew away. Did you just? Kakashi dared to query. Asuma attested to the fact that he controlled the wind and wrapped it around his hand. It's definitely more than I'm capable of. Sora, already appearing a little worn out, waved him away. It's less impressive than you think. It takes an insane amount of chakra to do even that much, so it's not all that useful in a fight. He laughed. I always thought it looked cool, though. Asuma shook his head, saying, that's too bad. If you were able to control wind like that in combat. He looked at Kakashi and said, well, I know I wouldn't want to be the one to fight you. Have you ever seen anything like that before? He asked. Kakashi sighed, not really. The closest I can think of are the rumors about the Raikage's lightning armor. Lightning alone would be hard enough to control to that degree, but wind. Sora laughed. Says the man with the magic eye. I'd say the ability to just steal people's techniques is better than some parlor trick. Well, I am the copy ninja. That's sort of what I do. He rolled his eyes at his friend. I always thought that was a terrible nickname. And I'm assuming you have an amazing one that you're just dying to share. I thought you'd never ask. Sora said with a smile. A voice boomed suddenly from the other side of the clearing. Kakashi, Asuma, we're training your students over here. When exactly were you idiots planning to be responsible and do your jobs? Kurenai was glaring at their small group when Kakashi turned to look at them. In a moment of shock, he blinked and said, oh right, the training, I forgot. This was your idea, Kakashi. How could you forget about it? Sora asked. Asuma said, don't bother, Sora-san, and rubbed his eyes. Let's just leave before she gets any angrier, he suggested, starting to approach Kakashi. The rest of us gave up on using logic with Kakashi years ago. Asuma was the one who wanted to walk off and learn wind techniques. Kakashi told them, I just came to watch. Asuma gave a headshake. When they got there, he said, what did we miss, Kurenai? Kurenai arched an eyebrow at the man in frustration, but she simply sighed when she saw that he was genuinely unaware of the circumstances. The clearing where Asuma, Kakashi, and her own students had been training was where she swept her arm. The going hadn't been good. The Uzumakis would take the fight fairly seriously, so the teachers had decided to have all 9 of their students spar with either one of them or the Uzumakis. It had been intended to teach them how to respond in a scenario that was similar to the one that Kakashi's own students encountered while visiting Wave. At the moment, their third battle of the day pitted them against Naomi. Sadly, it didn't appear that any of the students understood that the exercise's real goal was to try to cooperate in order to flee and survive, not to try to win. Kakashi added that his students would have to swallow their pride if the rumors he had heard about the Kage's children were accurate. Sasuke and Naruto in particular. The only reason Naomi's turn was taking so long was that she didn't seem to be interested in trying to end the session at all. The woman was watching a strange kind of chaos unfold in front of her while she leaned back against a tree and occasionally made hand signals. All of the genin appeared to be trapped in Naomi's genjutsu, except for Hinata, who was lying sprawled at her feet. While some of them continued to attack the air, others ran around looking terrified. Kakashi couldn't tell if Shikamaru had broken the genjutsu or was simply trying to ignore it, but he was the only one who didn't appear bothered. He was lying in the grass with his eyes closed. Kurenai clarified, the Byakugan allowed Hinata to escape the genjutsu rather quickly. With so many other illusions to control, I doubt Naomi-san could be bothered wasting energy on trying to hinder her very much. But then Hinata tried to stop Naomi-san from maintaining illusions by attacking her. You can see how well that went. Asuma winced. It's too bad Guy didn't come. Maybe this would have gone better with his students helping them. Maybe. But it makes sense for Guy to train his team alone. His students have more experience, so he's training them to actually pass the Chunin exams, Kakashi replied. After that mess in Wave, I think it's more important for mine to just learn how to survive without me there to protect them. A voice from across the clearing said, that's a nice sentiment, Kakashi-san, and Naomi interrupted. However, she said, making a series of quick hand seals, and the sky darkened abruptly. All throughout the woods, fires broke out, raging in the trees and reducing the fields to ashes. Winged creatures formed of living flames swooped down to attack the students, who were surrounded on all sides by a swirling conflagration. Unless your idea of survival includes them being trapped in nightmarish illusions until their enemies get bored of toying with them, I don't think they're getting much out of this exercise right now. Well, I guess that explains why they're panicking so much, Kakashi said. I'm surprised none of the others have broken out of it yet, Asuma said. I know they don't have much experience with genjutsu, but it has been a willia. The woman glanced at Kurenai, who nodded back at her. A few tried, Naomi said, but I'm probably one of the best genjutsu users you'll ever meet. There's no way a normal genin would be able to break through my illusions by themselves. Besides, as you can see, I've been keeping them distracted. But I suppose that this is more than enough for now, she determined. Naomi snapped her fingers and held up a hand idly. The illusions vanished in a moment. Some of the genin stiffened, as though anticipating a trick, then relaxed. The words, I guess that means were interrupted when Kiba charged at Naomi, with Naruto forming a gang of shadow clones in close pursuit. The woman dropped Kiba with a swift blow to the stomach, easily avoiding his crazed attack. After turning around, she grabbed the first Naruto to approach her and threw him into the rest of the group, scattering them all into smoke clouds. Seeing the boy's ruse at once, Naomi turned and seized the real Naruto as he attempted to ambush her. Before he could recover, she spun him around and threw him into Kiba. After flying across the clearing, the boys crashed into a tree and collapsed in a tangled heap on the ground. I win, Naomi concluded after wiping her hands. Unless someone else wants to try? She asked, glancing at the 6 genin that were left. They all remained silent. Good. Kakashi grimaced as he turned to face the moaning Naruto and Kiba. You didn't actually expect that to work, did you? Naruto confessed, I thought she'd finally run out of chakra. In a real fight a stupid illusion wouldn't beat me. We would have won if she hadn't kept using cheap tricks, Kiba said. Naomi raised her eyebrows. First of all, there's no such thing as cheating in a fight. Either you win, or you don't. Trying to fight fairly will only get you killed. Second, don't underestimate genjutsu illusions. You'd be surprised how little reality seems to matter when it feels like your skin feels like it's melting. Be happy the worst you got were some monsters. And third, she looked down at Kiba, even if I hadn't used genjutsu, you still would have lost. There would have just been more bruises. Basically, she's saying you're both idiots, a voice said in a drawl. Rising to his feet, Shikamaru stretched. What? Exclaimed Kiba and Naruto, starting to quarrel. Ignoring their arguments, Naomi knelt down to see how Hinata was doing while Kurenai pulled Asuma along to give the students a lesson on how to handle genjutsu more effectively. Another genjutsu demonstration, Kakashi thought. I'll give Naomi-san credit for being good, but she doesn't seem to use taijutsu very often for someone who should be an expert in the art. Perhaps I'm overanalyzing the situation, or perhaps she doesn't want to show us. Given the circumstances that compelled Sora to use the Rasengan, he cast a sidelong glance at her and said, I doubt I'll get an answer anytime soon. In any case, I don't have time to worry about it at the moment. He let out a sigh. After everyone was out of earshot, Sora remarked, not going as well as you'd hoped, is it? Kakashi gave a headshake. I'd expected them to try to win the first match, maybe the second, but this is getting ridiculous. I'd hoped getting beaten into the ground a few times would be a convincing way to teach them that it's acceptable to retreat sometimes, but I suppose we'll have to spell it out for them. My students at the very least should have learned that lesson from their experience in Wave. It's only natural, they're going to take the Chunin exams in a couple weeks. Of course they want to pass. Kakashi pondered, perhaps it was a mistake to give them the option to take the exam. His companion sighed. Well, there's no taking it back now, you won't be able to stop Sasuke-kun and Naruto-kun at any rate. Besides, who knows how many more chances they'll have to do something like this. I've heard the test can be dangerous, but compared to the real world, he continued. I just get the feeling that guy we ran into in Wave isn't going to be the last strong opponent any of us face. I hope that will be sufficient to keep them all alive, and they can use all the experience they can get for when that time comes. I know, Kakashi concluded. It looks like all we can do for now is keep preparing them. Kakashi hesitated. So, he started, changing the subject. What are you and Naomi-san fighting about? I don't know what you're talking about, Sora said, tensing. You've barely said a word to each other the entire afternoon, he said. You're imagining things. Want my advice? No, Kakashi sighed, it's almost a little strange. From what I've seen, you two hardly ever get worked up about anything. It's like the things regular people worry about barely even register for you. Makes me wonder what happened in the past that you're always lying about for you to be that way. Sora gave him a warning glance. He laughed. My point is, whatever you're fighting about, just try to remember Naomi-san is only trying to do what she thinks is best, just like you are. Not that we're fighting, Sora said, shaking his head, but I know that, Buddha thanks. I appreciate the thought. Of course not. You'd better be careful, Kakashi. Keep talking like this and people might start to think you're capable of being reasonable sometimes. Innocently, Kakashi questioned, who? Me? Reaching into his satchel, the man took out a book. Never. Hinata walked languidly toward her house. It had been a lengthy lecture, and she had just finished listening to Kurenai go over all the things she and her team had done incorrectly during their training exercise. She moaned as she massaged her aching jaw, which was still hurting from Naomi's earlier blow to her. Although Hinata was aware of her teacher's good intentions, she didn't see the purpose of their most recent exercise, which only served to confirm that she wasn't prepared for the Chunin exam. It seemed to her that she had been essentially worthless the whole time. Even when it came to Naomi's genjutsu, which everyone should have trusted, she had fallen short, losing the battle nearly instantly. Hinata couldn't decide whether her embarrassment at her failure or her disappointment in herself was worse. The girl thought glumly, I wish Naruto didn't have to see me like that. She froze, her eyes widening, as she turned a corner and saw Naruto strolling contentedly alongside Sora and Naomi. She let out a tiny squeak and then scurried away, disappearing from view. What are they doing here? Hinata watched them for a few long moments as she peered around the corner once more. She experienced a tug of desire. Perhaps I ought to speak with them? She pondered. No, I've already looked foolish enough for one day in front of Naruto-kun. I'd better go home before Naruto-kun notices me. He'd think I was weird. Watching him like Thesa, not that this would be the first time, the girl said, closing her eyes and shrugging. After opening her eyes and glancing at the scene one last time, she scowled. Wait, wasn't a voice yelled from above, oh, I wouldn't worry too much about that. With a start, Hinata staggered back and looked up to see Naomi smiling from her awning perch. That boy is, if nothing else, rather oblivious to his surroundings. Naomi-san. The girl stumbled while saying it. Wasn't expecting to see you here. Naomi said, not a problem, and slid down ahead of her. Naturally, I'm certain you were just about to come over to say hi. It is the polite thing to do, after all. I was just so excited to see you, I couldn't help but come over first. Yes, naturally, she said, looking around frantically for a way out. Hinata turned to leave, saying, unfortunately, my father is expecting me for training, so if you would please excuse me. She felt something pulling at the hood of her coat as she took her first step. I'm certain Sama won't mind too much. Today is your day off from training, after all. You must have forgotten what day it was, an honest mistake. Hinata shook her head and turned back to the woman, trying in vain to hide her embarrassment. How dia, she said. Of course, my mistake. Naomi's grin softened. Part of being a ninja is knowledge and secrets. I know more than you might guess, Hinata-san. Hinata knew the woman was telling the truth, even though Naomi didn't express it. Hinata sensed understanding, though it was more than mere knowledge. Awareness of the burden she is carrying and her worries. Kurenai experienced kindness and empathy from Hinata's words, which she found indescribable. However, her teacher was never able to fully comprehend the expectations of her father and clan, which she felt were slamming her into the ground all the time. Naomi, however, somehow comprehended. Hinata was sure of that, but she wasn't exactly sure why. However, she was bothered by something. Although the woman always came across as kind and polite, Hinata couldn't help but feel that there was something more going on behind her friendly exterior that the girl was unable to fully identify. It was almost as though Naomi was troubled simply by the sight of Hinata. Occasionally the girl felt a tinge of annoyance, as she had grown accustomed to hearing from her father when he was disappointed in her strength. But mostly, Hinata believed she was saddened by the woman, maybe even a little envious. She has been kinder to me than I deserve, but perhaps that's just my imagination, Hinata thought. Though I'll admit I don't know why you're staring at me like that, Naomi said, tilting her head to the side. Hinata waved her hands in front of her in apology, embarrassed once more, saying, I'm sorry, Naomi-san, I was just lost in thought. Ah, well I can guess what you were thinking about. Or perhaps I should say who you were thinking about, Naomi responded with a wink, pointing toward Naruto's location. No, I wasn't a W. What do you mean? ID. Don't know what you're talking about. Hinata sputtered as her face started to flush. You're rather unconvincing, you do know that? Hinata struggled to find the right words to respond. She sighed deeply, giving up. Am I really that obvious? Yes. Yes you are. Naomi was clearly trying, but failing, to contain her laughter. Naruto must think I'm a freak, Thina. Oh, he doesn't know. But you just Sahida. I said you were obvious. That doesn't mean Naruto-kun isn't a fool. As I said, he is rather oblivious. Hinata's eyes widened at her outburst, and she quickly covered her mouth, saying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean a. The girl felt a twinge of anger at the comment. No he's not, he's kinda and the bravest person I've ever met. Playfully ruffling the girl's hair, Naomi laid a gentle hand on her head. Never apologize for speaking your mind. But you misunderstand. I didn't mean that as an insult. Even so, that does not mean that Naruto-kun isn't a bit of a fool. Hinata opened her mouth to object, but Naomi used her hand to stop her. No person is perfect. My husband he is reckless, lacks common sense, and drives me crazy with his stubbornness. The woman smiled at her, but he's also undyingly loyal, would do anything to protect people, is a genius fighter and can befriend practically anyone. He is, without a doubt the best person I have and will ever meet. What you must understand, Hinata-san, is that love requires you to understand and accept a person, faults and all. Without that, what you're left with is infatuation, or worse, idolization. She poked Hinata on the forehead. And since you barely even know Naruto-kun, what you're experiencing right now is better defined as a crush, not love. Feeling angry and a little betrayed, the girl swatted Naomi's hand away. You're wrong, she choked out, I do know Naruto-kun and I love him. He makes me want to be a better person, she huffed. I do love him, don't ya? Naomi looked at herself. No, I'm sorry, I'm not saying this well, am I? I didn't mean I'm not trying to upset you or belittle your feelings. The point is that love comes with time and knowing a person. And like I said, whether you want to admit it or not, you barely know Naruto-kun. So why don't you try doing something about that? God knows he'll never notice otherwise. Hinata was surprised because, even from Kurenai, she wasn't used to getting such advice. The girl understood that the older woman was attempting to assist, but she was still unsure if she agreed with her statements. Hinata and Naruto did want to spend more time together. However, she felt herself withdrawing into the security of her shell because it's so difficult. She said, I don't know what if he doesn't like me, while putting her fingers together. Naomi sighed. As adorable as your insecurities are, I need you to recognize that they're holding you back, and not just from your relationships. Your lack of confidence will only get in your way. Better to solve it now than when your team needs you on the battlefield. Hinata said, I wish I could be as strong as you are, but she quickly regretted it when she noticed the gloomy cloud that engulfed Naomi's face. No, you don't, Naomi said after pausing for a while. Sensei, she once told me that power came at a price. And she was right. The price she paid. The woman nodded. For most people, they simply think of this in terms of jutsu, techniques, chakra, all of that is true, but there's more to it than that. Time, work, there are any number of prices one might pay. Some worse than others. My price was experience. My pain, my losses, and my friends and my family trust me when I tell you it wasn't worth it. I would gladly give up all of my ability and skill to see my little sister one last time. She was at a loss for words. The woman appeared more worn out now than Hinata had ever seen her. She didn't say anything because she knew Naomi wouldn't want an apology. At last, the woman gave Hinata a tight smile, concealing her feelings as she met Hinata's gaze. But that's enough about my demons. The reason I'm telling you these things is because, believe it or not, I was just like you when I was younger. Don't waste years fearing what might happen every time you make a move, because if you don't try at all, you're guaranteed to fail. If you can learn to put a little faith in yourself, Naomi said with a warm smile, then perhaps you can become stronger and find a little bit of happiness for yourself. Besides, Naomi looked sheepishly away, I also happen to think you'd be a cute couple. I don't think I really believe you were as bad as Maya, and I don't know if I agree with everything else you said, Buddha. Hinata smiled back at the woman for the first time. Thank you. For believing in me. Maybe I should try. At least try talking to Naruto, that is. Naomi grabbed Hinata's hand and said, well then, now that that's decided, you can start by coming to dinner with us. A gleam of mischief appeared in her eye as she said, that's all I ask. Uh-huh. It'll be fun. Just think of it like a date. Oh, and remind me to work stealth into our next training session, your eavesdropping skills are terrible. Hinata's cheeks began to burn as she exclaimed, Did you just say a D? Date? I didn't agree to that. Naomi assured her, I'm just kidding. Oh, okay, well that's a. As she started to pull Hinata out into the street, she teased, it's more like a double date, adding, there are 4 of us after all. Why? You're kidding, right? Please tell me you're kidding. Hinata scrambled to free her hand from Naomi's hold. The woman shrugged and said, I guess you'll just have to come and see for yourself. Actually, I think I've changed my mind. It's late, so I should probably be getting home. Can you let go now please? And Naomi-san? This isn't very nice, Naomi-san? What was that? You're starving. Perfect, me too. Naomi hummed a tune casually. Naomi-san. Hinata doubled over in agony as she slammed into the wall and fell to the ground. She reasoned that this wasn't exactly the training she had in mind. She threw herself out of the way as she saw a fist flying in her direction and looked up just in time. Faster, insisted Naomi. She ran once more in Hinata's direction. Naomi's hands sprang out as she got closer. Hinata reached out and attempted to pry them apart. Naomi's face lit up with a smile. A kick went toward Hinata's head, and she felt the arms she was holding vanish into thin air. When Hinata ducked, a leg swept away her feet, causing the world to spin sideways. Hinata started to swim as her head cracked against the floor. She muttered, I dodged those attacks, as she stumbled slowly to her feet. You didn't dodge anything. All I did was sweep your feet. The rest were genjutsu. Naomi looked at her wryly and shrugged. You didn't think illusions always needed to be large or scary, did you? Naomi said. Her eyes grew wide. Was that genjutsu? Can you use it that way? Hinata worriedly pondered. Once more, Naomi hurried her. Hinata swerved just in time to avoid a fist that was aimed at her head. Rather, her head snapped backwards after being struck squarely in the forehead. Hinata took a step back, attempting to gather herself. Your hands saw the force, the sound, I still feel that. You're really telling me none of that was real? Asked Hinata. Naomi laughed. Most genjutsu users aren't strong physically. Most taijutsu users are terrible at genjutsu. But if you master more than one of the 3 branches, you'd be surprised what you can do. That is the problem with the Hyuga. So rigid, so stubborn. So focused on their old traditions and techniques they can never think of anything quite that different. It makes them so much weaker. And predictable. I wonder whether you can avoid that trap. Although Hinata scowled at the criticism, she had to concede that Naomi was right. Her clan was powerful, but its customs frequently suppressed it. Hinata eyed her suspiciously while Naomi kept staring at her, apparently at ease. She was starting to second-guess her decision to ask the woman to train her. She was just as demanding, if not more so, than her father. The primary distinction was that Naomi seemed to think Hinata could handle the situation. Hinata was appreciative that Naomi appeared to see her potential. She did not prioritize Hyuga techniques over everything else, in contrast to her father. Instead of demeaning or insulting her, the woman pushed her. The training was getting painful, which was a drawback. A great deal. You're distracted, observed Naomi. She again threw Hinata backwards by slamming a fist into her chest. Don't be. This time, Hinata sprang away from Naomi by using the wall. She shaped her chakra for one of the new genjutsu she had learned by activating her Byakugan and forming hand seals. Molten skin, she muttered to herself. Naomi smiled at her after slowing down. She repeated the same technique, saying, burning skin. Not bad, you are learning. However, it needs to be a bit more intense. Let me show you. Hinata's skin exploded with pain. Her whole body seemed to be melting. She may be able to see through some illusions with the aid of her eyes. Furthermore, that didn't exactly help them stop feeling everything. She used the genjutsu and pressed her hands together as her legs started to give way. She was still panting and covered in perspiration, but the heat and pain subsided. Naomi stood in front of her and said, I'm impressed you're still on your feet. She raised a kunai to her throat and whispered, but that was only a diversion, and now you're dead. As she started to shiver, she whimpered, I'm not strong enough to beat you. Naomi dropped the kunai and spun around, kicking out in her direction. Neither is that boy you're always pining after. But he never seems to believe that. Weren't you telling me you respected that will of his? That he never gave up? She asked. I'm not as strong Naruto-kun, Hinata said, somersaulting away. Nevertheless, she pulled a pair of shuriken from her sleeve and hurled them at Naomi. The woman swirled like water around the assault. Perhaps not. But if you aren't, one day he might need you and you'll fail him. And he'll die. Or maybe it'll your teacher. Or your teammates. Or your sister. If I were you, I'd make sure you were strong enough before that happened. Hinata yelled, startled by the fear and rage in her voice. Why? You don't know that. She raised a hand to her mouth and blew a big puff of flame in the woman's direction. Oh, she replied, blocking the attack with a wall of earth, but I do. Sora is the only one left of all my friends and family. How do you think that happened? That it was luck? No, I was too weak. Had I been stronger Awella. She allowed the thought to linger. Hinata's gaze expanded. She muttered, that's horrible. She heard someone say, the world is horrible, from behind her. Another kunai appeared at Hinata's throat, causing her to jump and the figure of Naomi in front of her to vanish. And your distraction just led to another death for yourself. Had Naruto been here, and I'd been an enemy, how long do you think he'd last against me? Not long, Hinata said, halting. Then learn to save him, while you still can. You're not showing all you know, are you? No, but I but won't bring anyone back to life. Sometimes you only have one chance. Do you want him to die because of you? I could accept my own death. But something inside Hinata snapped, but it was Naruto. Kun's. No, she shouted. She started spinning, encircling herself with chakra. Revolving heaven. She exclaimed as she knocked the kunai out of Naomi's grasp and her power started to toss her aside. She managed to push Naomi back for the first time. The woman steadied herself and regarded her critically. Then she hurried ahead. I'm not finished yet, Hinata thought. 8 trigramza. Naomi's eyes went wide with shock. She said, 2 palms, and struck out. She continued to attack, sliding around Naomi's side as her attacks were blocked. 4 palms. She tried to duck under Naomi's guard once more but was blocked. 8 palms, she said, smiling, and 16 palms. Hinata finished by hitting Naomi's chest, blocking a tenketsu, and sending her sliding away once more. Naomi remained motionless for a moment. Then she burst out laughing. Good. Very good. That's it, she said, grinning viciously as she looked up. She exclaimed, now let's move this up a level, as 2 lions burst into life around her fists. What on earth is that? As the woman assaulted her once more, Hinata pondered. As Hinata kept sucking in breaths, Naomi patted her back and apologized if she had come across as too harsh. But you did a good job, she said. Glaring up at the woman, Hinata said, you knocked me across a training room for an hour. Naomi turned away, flushed. Was she truly ashamed? She cleared the air. Yes, well I've never had a student before you, she continued, and I'm still not used to pulling my punches. Not after a never mind. Hey, I already said sorry, and hey, you were able to use those Hyuga techniques too, weren't you? Have you been able to use them before? Hinata said, no, I haven't, grinning amusedly because she wasn't used to seeing elderly women in such a panic. Thank you for that. Naomi, who was still a little embarrassed, gave a forceful nod. So I'm your student now. Naomi hesitated, then slowly turned to look at her. She gave her a sidelong glance and said, call me sensei and I'll throw you off that mountain. I'm not old enough to be a teacher yet. You're only a year or two younger than Kurenai. Sensei though, aren't you? Iya Supposia. Wait, how do you know that? The Byakugan makes it easy to make a good guess. And I know how old Sensei is already, Hinata said, pointing to her eye. Doesn't matter, I'm still younger, she said. I'm not ready to be older anyway, she said quietly. I'm nothing close to what my own teacher Wasa. Hinata sighed. Well, I don't know who your teacher was, but I think you seem just as responsible and strong as Kurenai. Sensei, Naomi.san. You think so? Naomi asked, her eyes widening in surprise as she raised her gaze to the sky. Huh. For a while, they sat in friendly silence, Hinata unwinding as her discomfort subsided. You know, insisted Naomi. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, she stated. Hinata was the next to be taken aback. She was at a loss for words. Knowing you, you probably thought I agreed to teach you out of pity. Hinata received a gentle slap on the forehead for nodding along. Ouch. Ignoring her, Naomi went on. Well, I did it because you have potential. Also, you remind me of myself. Perhaps that's why I'm so hard on you. Hinata's mouth parted, then shut again. Had anyone ever told her that she had potential? Kurenai might have done it once or twice, but she had always thought it was a gesture of goodwill. Ia appreciate the thought. But I'm still nothing like you, Naomi.san. You're so smart, beautiful and strong. I'm just a me. I can't even tell a boy how I feel about him. In fact, Hinata felt herself shrink away as Naomi started to laugh at that. Naomi, however, put an arm around her shoulder and drew her in before she could get any worse. Naomi read her face and gave her an amused glare. I was everything you were when I was your age. Weaker, even, because I hadn't been able to use my clan's techniques like you just did. My father was constantly disappointed in me. My family thought I was a failure. I was shy and I'd barely ever spoken to Sora, even though I had a massive crush on him. Unable to conceal her shock, Hinata turned to face her and said, There's no way. Naomi fluffed her locks. You'd be surprised how much people can change. How much you can change, if you believe it's possible. With a hint of curiosity in her voice, she inquired, What changed for you? Naomi remained motionless. Life, she replied. Years ago, I tried to protect Sora from someone. Ida did not go well. We both lived. Barely. But I never forgave myself for not being strong enough when he really needed me. That was my first turning point. And after the constant battles after seeing my master, friends and family die? Well, you either change or you die as well. Like I said earlier, Sora's all I have left. He thinks I get overprotective sometimes, but I can't help it. I'll do whatever I can to keep the one person I have left. The most important person I have. She turned her gaze elsewhere. Though after all these years, sometimes I wonder if the boy I fell in love with even exists anymore. Though I suppose it doesn't matter. The girl I was, the kind girl that fell in love with Hima, she disappeared years ago. Hinata looked at her with sorrow. I'm sorry to hear what you went through, though I'm not certain I'd want to watch everyone die just to strengthen myself. To change so much in that way just to gain strength. According to Naomi, you don't, but that's why I'm here to help you, to make sure you can change without learning things the harder way. She tilted her head slightly. Maybe we should start with Naruto. He seems like a good way to motivate you. Talking about him helped you use those techniques after all. Talking about him dying, you mean? Hinata shivered. Naomi shrugged and said, It worked, didn't it? If you want, we can try another date. That wasn't a date, Hinata yelled, her whole face turning a deep crimson. You literally dragged me against my will and She turned to face Naomi, who was trying hard not to laugh. You enjoy this, don't you? Oh, very much. You have no idea. Hinata drew a long breath. Maybe we can take it a step at a time for now, she replied. Do you really think there's hope for me, Naomi.san? Well, you already used those techniques. And you haven't stuttered yet this conversation, have you? Hinata noticed and said, Ia haven't, have I? Hinata got to her feet and stretched, feeling hopeful. Thank you for your help. Truly. Naomi smiled at her and said, Of course, Hinata.san. Why don't you head home? I think you've done enough for one day. I can teach you some new techniques the next time I help you train. She looked at the woman and said, Thank you, I'd appreciate that. Then, I'll be on my way. She added, Naomi. Sensei, and then bounded off. Hinata was momentarily only able to hear her own footsteps, then Naomi started shouting. Get back here so I can throw you off that cliff. Hiruzen tapped his desk with his fingers. He had no patience for this bureaucracy and was tense about the impending battle. He had been listening to some of the facilitators' monotonous chatter for the upcoming tests for the past few hours. He had to endure conversations about the event's specifics because none of them were high enough in the hierarchy to have been informed of the impending invasion. Under normal circumstances, it would have been annoying, but considering what was about to happen, it was an agonizing waste of time. The only thing that prevented him from hurling everyone out of his office hours ago was his wish to conceal his knowledge from Orochimaru. After saying, "That concludes our report, Hokage Sama," Hayate concluded. After learning of Hayate's premature passing from Sora and Naomi, Sarutobi had altered his role. They had no idea how it had happened, but the Hokage did something to help prevent it from happening again. Nevertheless, despite his effectiveness, the man was extremely meticulous when it came to the tests. Time is of the essence, Hiruzen reflected. He gave the group a nod. "Very well, is that all?" "Well, I did want to ask," Hayate said. "Are you certain you do not wish the recent transfers from Uzushiogakure to take part? From what I understand, they are still untested, and some of the longtime genin area frustrated after hearing of their quick promotions. Given that, would it not be prudent Toa? Unless you want to let two S-class ninja loose into the exams, then yes, I am sure," Hiruzen said, raising a hand. Hayate swallowed hard and said, "S. Classa. Why area never mind. Of course, excuse the question, Hokage Sama. Tell those frustrated genin that if that want a promotion, they need to earn it through their actions rather than complaining about the ranks of others." Again, he exhaled. He didn't have time to hear more grievances regarding ranks that had no purpose. They seemed to go on forever. Besides, they should understand by now that the exam is more about village relations than it is about ranks. And they know it's not the only way to receive a promotion. I am not about to turn these exams into chaos just to please them. Of course, Hokage Sama. I shall make sure your words reach the right ears, Hayate said with a bow. Stone-faced, Hiruzen watched the administrators exit the room. He pushed himself away from the desk as the door closed. He whispered, "I have to leave this office." Two Anbu members immediately stepped in front of him. "Alone," explained he. The two paused. "But Sira," one dared to say. He sighed, "It'll only be a short while, also, I'm stronger than both of you, now leave me be." They nodded and vanished after a moment. He rubbed his forehead when he was by himself. These headaches were too much for an elderly man to handle. He wished Minato were here instead of him for the millionth time. If nothing else, Minato would not have allowed Orochimaru to escape as he did. With a sigh, Hiruzen got up. For a few hours, he didn't feel particularly like being identified as the Hokage, so he took a hooded cloak to hide his identity and walked out the window to avoid any unwanted attention. After he hit the ground, he started to wander around the village without a purpose. There were still many things he needed to think about before the Chunin exams started in a few days. He pondered once more if he would survive the experience. The thought was surprisingly soothing to him. He had been on the verge of death many times. What did it matter if, as it seemed to have done at another time, it finally caught him here? Having a death date gave one a sense of freedom. Maybe it gave him the confidence to face the future, to know that Tsunade could lead Konohagakure and that Sora and Naomi were there to keep the village safe while he was away. I wondered if Tobirama Sensei felt this way when he sent us off to fight a small army by ourselves. He saw Naruto at a ramen stand, laughing and waving enthusiastically with Iruka and Sora beside him, as he was walking down a side street. Hinata was following Naomi as she approached the three. The little girl appeared frightened. Did she have dirt on her body? Hiruzen laughed to himself at the absurdity of the scene. He noticed that Naomi's gaze briefly lingered on him after flicking in his direction. She gave a barely perceptible nod and turned her head away. He gave her a respectful and mildly amused look. "She's smarter than her father," he said. "She also never appears to let her guard down." After observing the tumultuous scene for a few more moments from the edge of his vision, he turned down a street and started to leave. "Those two are new," a voice stated above him. Hiruzen continued to walk, sighing as he moved into an alley and out of sight of any onlookers. "I'd hoped to find some peace and quiet for a few moments. You are the antithesis of that, my boy. And they aren't new. You've just been gone for over a year. Well, it's not my fault you're always sending me out on missions. I don't have many people I can trust as much as I do you," Jiraiya shot back the Hokage. His pupil appeared to emerge from the shadows as the air before him shimmered. Despite his constant smile, the man continued to look in the direction that Hiruzen had come from. As Hiruzen noted, "You can speak to him, you know. I think he would be happy to know he had a godfather." Jiraiya was nervous. "I don't even deserve to speak with him. Not after I wasn't here when his parents needed me most. I've told you before, that wasn't your fault. Jiraiya nodded. Minato was like a son to me. What father leaves his son to fight and die alone? He shrugged his shoulders. Besides, you know I've tried helping children before. What happened to Yahiko, Nagato and Konana? Perhaps if I'd done better, taught them better Owella, maybe they wouldn't all be dead now. Naruto's better off without me there. At least I know he will soon change his mind, Hiruzen sighed. Those two though, can they be trusted around him? Jiraiya went on. I've dealt with enough hidden threats to the boy to know the value he could have to some groups. Hiruzen nodded his head. They are trustworthy. They were the ones who warned us of Orochimaru. That aside, I would entrust them with the fate of the village if need be. Strong words, coming from you. If you trust them, I guess that's good enough for me, old man. Just tell me one thing, old man. Are they good to him? Jiraiya's eyes widened at that, but he nodded. They are, Hiruzen said with a softer expression. Few people in the village have ever shown him kindness like they do. He turned away for a second before turning back to the Hokage. As for Orochimaru, he scowled. I never expected this much. Not even from him. Neither would I, Hiruzen said with a nod of agreement. We both have that weakness, I guess. Having the same level of faith in Orochimaru as we did. It's beneficial that we are aware in advance. I don't want to think about what might have occurred if we hadn't been ready. As the Hokage pinched the bridge of his nose, Jiraiya watched him, anticipating the next question they knew Hiruzen would ask. And a Tsunade? Yes, indeed. She didn't think I was real. She told me that we could both burn in hell and that this impending attack from Orochimaru was your most pathetic lie to date. Tsunade had always been too stubborn for her own good at times, just like her grandfather. We'll have to make do without her skills, then. Hiruzen was not surprised, but it wasn't what he had hoped to hear. In fact, her apprentice approached me after and offered to come help, just in case, Jiraiya said, shaking his head. If she turned out to be mistaken, she seemed to believe Tsunade would regret it. Additionally, we are both aware of her typical gambling success with these items. She assured me that she would find a way to attend prior to the finals. That surprised Hiruzen. Her apprentice. It was Dan's niece, if I recall correctly. We can probably trust her too, if she is Tsunade's apprentice. Besides, we'd like another qualified medic. If we're lucky, maybe she can persuade Tsunade to come back after this is over. It's always difficult to tell with Tsunade, Jiraiya concurred, but if we're lucky. And the Akatsuki? The Hokage acknowledged with a grunt. There hasn't been any progress there yet. It appears that the Akatsuki are not involved in whatever Orochimaru is planning. Well, that's one less threat I suppose, Hiruzen thought. Having to fight them as well could be too much for us. Old man, anything else? Hiruzen nodded. That is all. Thank you Jiraiya, though I should introduce you to our new village members at some point. There have been some rumors that I've heard, but nothing that seems specific. In any case, why do you value them so highly? I will explain some other day, Hiruzen said, closing his eyes. Let me just say that, for the time being, I believe they could play a crucial role in the village's future. Strong words again, Hiruzen, Jiraiya said, as her eyes narrowed. I wonder what secrets you're hiding this time. I'm sure you'll find out the details eventually, Hiruzen shrugged. Not today, though. However, they are powerful enough to defeat Orochimaru, in my opinion. They will be necessary in the future. Well, I can see how significant they might be if that's the case. Then I will remember what you have said. Will you pardon me? Just don't pursue any of your absurd hobbies for a few days, Hiruzen said, pausing as he started to nod. Remember, you're not supposed to be here at this moment. I resent that accusation. Jiraiya, I would entrust you with my life, said Hiruzen, rolling his eyes. That doesn't imply that I don't think you'll be a fool occasionally. With a good sense of humor, Jiraiya reassured him. Do I seem like the kind of man to ignore a crisis to spy on girls? I said nothing of spying on women, Hiruzen replied after glancing at him. With a smile, Jiraiya disappeared into the darkness, leaving only the sound of laughter to indicate his presence. Shaking his head, Hiruzen said, will my damn students ever stop being idiots? He pondered. He turned to go. Maybe now he would have some quiet, and he would like it, since he had no idea if he would ever get another chance. During the first part of the Chunin exam, Sora and his wife sat on a roof a few blocks away from the exam center, watching teams of genin enter the building while Sora idly sharpened one of his knives. They were far enough away from the exam center to be unobtrusive, but close enough that Sora could still see them with his own limited range. As a precaution, They both made sure to keep an eye out for anyone approaching or observing them, which, considering Sora's inexperience with his own eye, meant that Naomi was actually the one watching over them both. If nothing else, the last 2 weeks had been hectic, with the two of them spending most of their time getting ready for the impending invasion behind the scenes or being dragged into more training sessions by their old instructors. Breaking the silence, Sora remarked, "It's strange to see them all fight so hard for this." "You mean the students? I had forgotten how excited I was," he said, nodding. "How important this test was to me. Now it seems so pointless. A lifetime ago." "It might as well be," she concurred, adding that we were 12 at the time of the test. 14 years? Sora, that makes a big difference. Particularly when 10 years of war are factored in. "I understand. I suppose it just makes me realize how naive I was to see myself running around like that." "I understand the sentiment," Naomi said with a TS King sound. "I want to shake myself sometimes. She needs to be stronger because she isn't ready." "Is that the reason you consented to assist her in training?" Naomi's gaze flicked over to him for a moment, but she didn't need to. "Yes, the few 1-on-1 sessions I've had with her hardly count as training. Unfortunately, not all of us had legendary ninja personally train us for years," she continued, adding, "and my skill set is so specialized now that if she's going to follow a similar path, I basically have to have at least some hand in guiding her training. Is it a wise decision to go down that path?" She sighed. "That's a different question. However, it's the best thing I can do with her until I find something better." "All right. However, I was unaware that being abducted and made to attend dinner constituted training." "I've only done it a couple times," she said naively, "but let's say I'm helping her respond better to new circumstances and build stronger relationships. Additionally, it's rather entertaining," she said, a sly smile creeping onto her lips. "I still don't understand why she seems so nervous about it, Thaw." Naomi's response was merely an eyebrow raise. "What? As oblivious as always, I see. What are you discussing?" She laughed. "Nothing. Nothing at all." For a few more minutes, they fell back into a friendly silence. Sora finally turned to look at his wife again, who appeared to be very relaxed, with her leg hanging languidly from the side of the roof and her eyes fixed on the horizon. Her face lit up with a knowing smile as she said, "You'll have to get used to not facing what you're looking at, it gives it away." Out of courtesy, she turned to face him. Sora remarked absently that even though the transformation concealed everything from the active Byakugan except the upraised veins, there was always something a little unnerving about Naomi's Isa, not that he would ever tell her. "It's a hard habit to break," Sora replied, rubbing his forehead in an attempt to relieve his pounding headache once more. "With time, you will adjust to it, and you already seem to be less bothered by it." "I feel like my head is going to blow up after barely 30 minutes. "Yes, that's what comfortable means," he snorted. Her teasing remark, "better than falling down after 5 minutes and curling up into a ball," made him wince at the thought. "Now stop whining. I see Lee talking to Sasuke. Does he intend to fight him? You never mentioned that to me." "Speaking of Sasuke," after a pause, she said, "Naruto," with a hint of steel in her voice, "do you really want to get into this now?" He continued, "We need to finish discussing this," even though Sora knew it would be a sensitive topic because they had avoided talking about it since that time in the Hokage's office and he could still sense some tension between them as a result. "We have run out of time." "I haven't changed my mind," his wife sighed. "Let's hope for the best and let Orochimaru apply his damned, cursed seal to him. And I think that would be completely unnecessary, not to mention cruel." "You are still so blind even with that eye," Naomi said, slamming her fist into the floor. "After all these years, how could you possibly still have this absurd blind spot for Sasuke? How many times has he attempted to kill you?" she yelled. The sudden venom in her voice took Sora by surprise, and she scowled. "I'm waiting." He didn't answer, though. "All right, let me remind you of something." She checked off a finger as she remarked, "There was that time on the hospital roof. I don't think he really would have killed me then." She continued to count off another finger while ignoring him. "That time in the Valley of the End," she added. "He decided not to kill me when he could have you." She gave him a sour look and said, "Oh, and I assume it was just an accident that sent you to the hospital?" In addition, he had repeatedly stated that he spared you only out of pity for his brother. Where was I now? Yes, exactly. When you attempted to save him from Orochimaru's hiding place, he nearly killed you, Sakura, Sai, and Yamato-san out of his boundless gratitude. Then where was his sympathy? Hell, the only reason he didn't do anything was because Orochimaru of all people stopped him. She screamed, her rage growing more and more apparent. You weren't there for him to try to kill you, so I suppose those shouldn't count. I could go into the times he joined forces with Akatsuki and attempted to capture B and the Eight Tails, or when he attacked the Cage Summit and attempted to kill everyone while crippling the Raikage. Sora said nothing. Who could overlook the bridge? That time when he decided that the best way to honor his deceased brother was to go on a killing spree, where he tried to kill his own teammate during his attack on Danzo, because, what? Naomi said with a bark of mocking laughter. Had she been kidnapped? She shook her head. You see, I detested Danzo. He then chose to complete his most recent round of atrocities by nearly killing Sakura, then attempting to kill Kakashi and you. He was a jerk who would have been better off dead. However, how can you even begin to defend the remainder of that catastrophe? I'm not saying that Sasuke's journey was simply he initially believed his brother had killed his entire clan on a whim before learning of his sacrifice, but let's face it. Sasuke is a loose cannon who helped Madara win and nearly killed us all. Several times. After a long period of silence, Sora said, so what do you recommend, Hinata? When he finally whispered, we simply murder our Alia, my best friend, in cold blood? Before he takes any action? A man I considered a brother? No, she firmly stated, I didn't say that. Despite what you may think, I want to believe in Sasuke, but I don't want to fight him or kill him. But keep in mind what our world turned into. I would do anything to save one of them, but I wouldn't risk the entire world for them. That's self-centered and doesn't pay tribute to their memory. She shook her head. My clan, my family, was destroyed, Naruto. Nearly all of our friends perished, Kiba, Shino, Hanabi. And they aren't even threats. The world, if Sasuke wishes to assist in defending the village? That's fantastic. That would be wonderful, but what if he makes an effort to prioritize his own small-minded retaliation over all others? If he obstructs our path, without hesitation, I'll burn him to ashes, she said, exhaling a sliver of flame and watching it dance across her palm. Either with or without your permission. You don't seem to realize that I don't think Sasuke's friendship and moral character are nearly sufficient. Not when compared to the world as a whole. Never again, she said, clenching her fist and putting out the flame. This is not a debate, Naruto. This is a warning. I will never have Sasuke try to kill my friends or my husband again. He shook his head and said, I know what you're saying, I do, I can't explain. You can't possibly understand what it feels like, Toa. He looked back and saw that Naomi was clearly trying to maintain her composure as the slap came like lightning, whipping his head to the side. Never again say anything like that to me. Why you have no idea what I do or do not understand, she said, raising a trembling hand. Kiba, Shinoa Kurenai, she whispered, her voice hoarse, my circa compassion, my weakness. Sora felt his heart break as he saw the cracks starting to form. It was so rare for Naomi's mask to slip so far, even with him, that he was at a loss for words. Even though Naomi never told him the whole story, he had seen her after it happened. Aside from her family's deaths, there was only one thing that could shake her this much, and he should have known better. Sora cursed his foolishness. Here he was, telling her she didn't understand the pain he felt, when she'd already been through far worse. Hinata. You're there, we were beginning to worry, he called as he fell to the ground close by, Hanabi by his side. Where's it? He stumbled as he got close enough to realize that Hinata was cradling someone in her arms. He recognized their face. Noah. The girl next to him nodded and triggered her Byakugan, and he looked at her. Naruto. Sana, she exclaimed. I'm sorry, Kiba, Shino, Sensei, Hinata muttered, seemingly staring through them. Forgive me, please forgive me, I didn't. Reaching out to embrace her, he said, oh, Hinata, this isn't your fault. She said. I hesitated, without looking up at him. I did this. I fail here, and my clan is disintegrating. I apologize. I was weak. Tell me what happened, tell me how I can help. Why? You're not Naruto, she said, pushing him away with a sudden rage in her white eyes. Who are you? Is this just another ruse? Hinata, he said, keeping her motionless, it's Naruto, it's me. You see, Hanabi is also here. In an attempt to avoid wondering what could have fooled a proficient Byakugan user like this in the first place, he pointed to the girl and assured her, this isn't a trick. As though she wasn't sure whether to believe him, Hinata appeared to find it difficult to concentrate on him. It doesn't matter. Why you need to get away? You two, like the others, I'll get you two killed, as I had been warned. What warning? What are you discussing? Hinata's eyes appeared to focus abruptly, and she seized him, a drowning woman gasping for air, saying, I won't let it happen, never again, never again. How could he blame her? Sora doubted he could have handled it even half as well. He only wished he could show her that she wasn't responsible somehow. Naomi was never the same after the incident, and even though she protested that she had made peace with what had happened, he doubted she could ever truly forget. Or forgive herself, even if she insisted otherwise. Sora had never heard more than a few words from his wife about what had happened, but even that had been enough for him to understand how traumatizing it had been. "That wasn't your fault," he said in a low voice. She glared at him as her head snapped up, saying, "Tell Kiba that, Toshino. They wouldn't have blamed you, and maybe we could have asked them that question if they had lived." Laughed Naomi. She started to tremble once more. "You've already witnessed the cost of my mistakes and my compassion. I made a decision, and it was the wrong one. Because of me, my entire team died within an hour. I refuse to allow my weakness and compassion to sabotage this opportunity to improve things and prevent any more deaths. I refuse to allow it to lead to yours." With a voice that was hardly audible, she concluded, "I won't lose you too. I can't lose you too. You're all I have left." "I'm sorry," Sora said sadly. "Yeah, I wasn't thinking." He recalled what Kakashi had told him weeks earlier, that Naomi was only attempting to do what she wanted to do. His wife's face appeared to be battling a range of emotions as she tried to gather herself. "It's okay," she said. "I shouldn't have lost my temper. I'm all right now. I've moved on." Sora wasn't persuaded, so he pushed, "Don't give me that," knowing it was risky, but not wanting to let her simply shut up like she always did. "We shouldn't continue to avoid this, even though I shouldn't have said what I did. You keep lying and acting as though you're fine, even though I know you're not. We've discussed the war, your clan," he said, shoving his hand away as it started to slink toward his headband. "But we've never discussed that day, not really," he added. "You're your sister. All I've done is watch you go through hardships or wake up from bad dreams wondering if I'm real. Like you are for me. I am here for you. If only you would discuss a..." "No." When Naomi screamed, shocking the man again, the mask briefly slipped back, and Sora noticed a flash of fear in Naomi's eyes for the first time since they had fled to the past. Sora quickly looked away, making sure no one had heard them. Realizing she had slipped a second time, Naomi dared to say, I trust you. You know I do. But now is not a good moment. We don't currently have time to talk about this. I'm all right." She insisted, I'm in control, I have it under control," but Sora wasn't sure if she was speaking to him or to herself. He wasn't pleased, but Sora dropped the subject without saying anything more. Naomi shuddered, and then the mask was put back on as if the incident had never occurred. "However, it doesn't matter what I say, does it?" The woman sighed. "Besides, you're changing the subject. We were talking about Sasuke. You're still unable to accept my point of view. It wasn't a question. Not about this." He averted his gaze and gazed at the floor for a considerable amount of time before nodding. "Naruto, you cannot save Sasuke from himself, regardless of your desire to do so. Do you not trust him?" He replied, "With my life, without hesitation." "Then have faith in him to navigate the darkness. Have faith that he can overcome the influence of Orochimaru. It is ultimately up to you." Looking at her hand, she trailed off, "I can't, or, more accurately, I won't force you not to interfere. Even though it is a grave error. Just think about what I said. And keep in mind my warning. You know you can't stop me if I want him dead." He replied roughly, "I'll consider it," after Sora had been silent for a while. She put her hand on his and said, "Good, I know this is difficult for you. I apologize for that. We'll need to move soon because it looks like the first test is about to start." Has Kurama provided any updates on the healing of his chakra? If he was being honest, Sora didn't think he could handle another touchy subject, but he suspected his wife was just trying to shift the conversation to something less likely to spark a fight. "I asked him earlier today." Sora exhaled deeply. When the fox at last stopped moaning and swearing. For a moment, the fox took charge and demanded, "You deserved it for interrupting my nap." "I warned you against doing that," Sora yelled. Naomi, accustomed to such arguing, simply grinned at the outburst. "Anyway," Sora said with a grumble, "I'll be lucky to have even a basic chakra cloak by the time of the invasion. Any amount of tails is even less likely, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see." "Well, that might be for the best. It could be problematic if Orochimaru found out that you were a Jinchuriki, particularly the 9 tails Jinchuriki. After that, make sure he controls his temper. My power has become unstable due to your brief excursion into the past. Controlling my chakra is difficult enough now, without the boy's feelings interfering," Kurama snarled. "I didn't think his emotions mattered when so long as you weren't trying to take over his body," Naomi said, her tone slightly annoyed. "It isn't a problem when I am in complete control. I am a being of pure chakra, but I no longer have complete control. Even if I don't attempt to control him, the power will still be leaking out. Then there's another thing to be aware of, Naomi said, shaking her head. However, he ought to be able to manage it. Of course I can handle it, I'm not 12 anymore, Sora grumbled. And you, he said to Kurama. Why do you feel the need to take over my body to speak to Hinata instead of just speaking in my head like you're supposed to, you dumb fox? Because I'm the only one of us with any sense, Naruto, Naomi teasingly said, cracking a wry smile. She has you there, Sora heard a chuckle rumbling in his head. Sora complained, I hate the both of you, but his words were without bite. The man was still concerned about their arguments and felt his wife's expression was still a little forced, but he was glad that she seemed to be feeling better, even if only slightly. Naomi scowled abruptly, it's not my fault you, damn. What is it? Release your Byakugan, it looks like Kakashi's heading our way. Why is he bothering us when he ought to be keeping an eye on his team? Sora deactivated his eye and asked. Naomi followed suit, saying, don't ask me, he's not my teacher. It didn't take long for them to wait in silence for Kakashi. Hey, what are two doing here? Exclaimed Kakashi as he leapt to their roof. Watching the exam, the thing you should be doing. Not the best view you've chosen, said Kakashi. Only those who pass the test need to be seen, Naomi clarified. I don't need to watch this portion of the exam, Sora-san, he said, looking at Sora, and I suppose there's not much to see for this first test anyway. I know my students well enough to know that they can at least pass this much. Your faith in them is admirable, Naomi replied, especially considering it's a written test. It's not really AA. All right, Naomi said, raising a hand. How does Naruto typically do when it comes to gathering intelligence? Not that bad, Sora replied right away. Naomi and Kakashi gazed at him. What? Sora inquired. Looking back at Naomi, Kakashi scratched the back of his head and said, as long as he doesn't forfeit, he'll be fine. Right, Naomi said with a laugh, what could go wrong? After averting his eyes, Kakashi said, I'm sure at least two of them will be fine. Want to explain your purpose for being here? She inquired. No reason, I just thought it'd be good to speak while we still. According to Sora, he wants answers while he can get them. Frowning, Kakashi said, what are you? A spinning ball of chakra materialized as Sora raised a hand, then turned to face Kakashi, allowing it to fade. That wasn't the only reason I came here, sighed Kakashi. I do now think of you as a friend, and I always make it a point to annoy my friends because. Are you constantly avoiding work and being lazy? Did Naomi ask? Better your pals. Sora continued. Ignoring her, he concluded, everyone always enjoys having my company. Sora said, right, while rolling his eyes, however, since we're already talking about it, you are aware that rather than ignoring the question, you could have claimed that Jiraiya taught you that method. Or asserted that you were taught by Minato Sensei. The Sannin? The irony of the suggestion amused Sora. And you would have simply accepted that? Or that your master forgot to tell you that I was some covert apprentice? I'd have considered the possibility, Kakashi said after pausing. All right. As if I'm foolish enough to fabricate such a horrible lie. Naomi whispered, you make me wonder sometimes. Hey, anyway, Sora groaned. No, I didn't learn from Jiraiya. As soon as you can locate him to ask, I'm positive he will tell you. The fourth didn't either. He sighed and said, I guess it wouldn't be that easy, but I guess Sakura would have perished without it, so I won't gripe. However, you do know I'm still going to learn the truth eventually, right? He asked, meeting Sora's gaze directly. You're welcome to try, smiled Sora. However, I would still like to know more about your methods, considering our impending predicament. You were told? Naomi interrupted, startled. It's a small circle for the time being, but the Hokage told a few of the Jonin so we could start getting ready and encourage the others to train. Asuma, Kurenai, Guy, Anko, and a few others are also aware. We are also aware of the source of the information. Naomi gave him a look. I don't mean to say I'm suspicious, Kakashi said, raising a hand. On the contrary. But we must all cooperate if we are to make it through this. I had hoped that you would train with us. I'd also like to know more about what you can do, even if you won't tell me how. What do you actually think two Chunin ninja will accomplish? Naomi asked naively. Sora and I have fought. Fight hard. I don't think you're a Chunin, and he's obviously not. To be honest, I think you're among the village's most formidable ninjas. For this battle, we will need to rely on both of you. After a long moment of staring at him, Naomi turned to face Sora, who nodded. Your invitation to train will be accepted. I can tell you some about our abilities, and we could use some practice against different opponents anyway, she replied. Although Sora is proficient in both taijutsu and daggers, as you have undoubtedly witnessed, his primary focus is ninjutsu. His abilities in genjutsu are wonderful, and I can answer myself, you know, Sora said. Limited, Naomi replied, ignoring him, but he's pretty good at fuinjutsu. Fuinjutsu? Surprised, Kakashi said. I assumed that the majority of the Uzumaki clan's fuinjutsu practitioners had long since passed away, but I knew you were a member. That's a unique ability. I'm mainly self-taught, Sora said, though I doubt I'm going to be sealing anyone away in this battle. Well, maybe. Kakashi turned back to Naomi and raised an eyebrow, saying, but you never know. You don't expect me to think that's everything, do you? I answered your question as best I can. Kakashi-san. Please don't ask for more, Naomi sighed. If he gets into a fight, let's just say that he will prevail, even in opposition to Orochimaru. That made Kakashi's eyes widen. That's some confidence you have there. At that, Naomi chuckled, not really, I could also defeat him. I knew you two were special, the man said, squinting his eyes before smiling beneath his mask. And I presume you'll just reiterate that you're an expert in taijutsu and genjutsu? I can also summon lions. Lions? Is that feasible? But they have a tendency to despise people, Naomi said, nodding. Throughout history, summoners have been extremely rare. It's not a widely recognized phenomenon. I see, sighed Kakashi. I guess that's more than I had previously realized. That you two could battle Orochimaru is comforting. However, I must admit that you employ surprisingly little taijutsu for a taijutsu master. I'm not required to. I can win most battles with just my genjutsu. Your skills are impressive, Kakashi said, adding, you certainly have an interesting approach to illusions. That oversimplifies things terribly. Naomi, suddenly filled with passion, began. Genjutsu is more than just illusions. It's about using chakra to influence and affect a mind. As an illustration, suppose I were Toa. I know, Kakashi said, raising a hand. You sound like Kurenai, She is the only other person I know who can get this excited about genjutsu, I promise. Sora could swear that Naomi's cheeks were slightly flushed when she stopped talking. Do I sound like her? Exactly the same, he said with a laugh. Anyway, I appreciate you responding to my query. I acknowledge that I'm being a little rude by asking you about your skills in this way. I'm glad to see you are so self-aware, Naomi made the statement. Kakashi sighed and, to the surprise of the two, bowed. I also came to thank you too, he said. We wouldn't even be aware of this attack without the two of you. In addition, you have benefited my students. I don't care if some people wonder where the information came from. We have an opportunity because of you. That is the only thing that counts. Naomi replied, that's a thank you, Kakashi-san, I'm grateful. Both of us do. Don't praise him too much, Naomi, Sora said with a sly smile. He already has a large enough ego. Kakashi sat down beside them. I think you're not really here to thank us, Sora said, glancing at him. You're simply bored. Blissfully, I didn't say I wasn't, Kakashi replied. Shouldn't the renowned copy ninja be doing something more important? Sora rolled his eyes. Kakashi grumbled, it's not like there's much I can do right now, and I've never liked that nickname. My masters? That one was far superior now. Well, mine's even better, Sora said. I am the ultimate godly Tempest Ofa. Naomi covered his mouth with her hand and said, no. Buddha, Sora started. I thought I told you to stop trying to use that stupid name, she said. It's not at Allah, she looked at him. HMPH, I'm not to blame for nobody listening. The name of my technique was simply stolen by those lazy bastards. Will you stop whining about that? Sighed Naomi. He's the divine wind, she said, turning to face Kakashi. Or to our adversaries, Sora of the Red Wind. He enjoys bringing it up constantly. Yet another name based on hair color? Kakashi asked, raising an eyebrow. Naomi looked at him and said, no, well, at least you come up with better names. Another of my old friends, Kakashi said, his eyes narrowing, but he remained silent. However, anything is preferable to naming oneself after a pepper, I suppose. But the chained demon of Konoha isn't the most satisfying of names, I guess, he thought. They also called her the Huntress of. Well, I guess it would be Konoha now, wouldn't it? Hers was the Heavenly Fist, Sora continued, gesturing to Hinata. He didn't inquire. Naomi remarked, and you made that one up. Yes, but keep in mind that everyone else did use it. Huh, Kakashi replied. I think this is the first time I've heard you talk about this. What are you talking about? Sora inquired. Your history, your former allies. Naomi paused, then smiled wanly at him, saying, there's not much left to say. We now only have stories about them. I understand how you feel, Kakashi said, nodding. Since you arrived, we've been at peace, but over the years, Konoha has lost a lot of decent people. Additionally, I've lost a lot of comrades while working for the Anbu. Kakashi.san, you were a member of the Anbu? Did Naomi ask? Nodding, he said, a lifetime ago. However, I was never really suited for it. He sighed, it's funny, one of my mentors in the Anbu. I had the skill, but she was aware of it from the beginning. What would Hitomi think of me now, I wonder? Naomi tensed at the name, as Sora saw, and Kakashi gave her a questioning look. You've heard of her, haven't you? The blind fist, Hyuga Hitomi, Naomi said with a nod. You don't forget the story. I'm shocked that you heard her. For obvious reasons, she is not frequently mentioned. Which are they? Sora inquired. After giving him a long look, Kakashi sighed and said, well, I guess it doesn't really matter because you seem to know bigger secrets in this village. In reality, Hitomi was not blind. She married into the Hyuga clan, but she wasn't born into it either. She was still unique, though. The Leaf has never created a ninja who was able to use the gentle fist without a Byakugan. She also had very good technique. Sora's eyes widened, and he turned to face Naomi, but she was gazing off into space. Hitomi Hyuga. Sora thought to himself, because she had told him the name, of course, but she had never explained it in detail. Sora inquired. Apparently, Kakashi said with a nod. She rivaled Heishi as a gentle fist master, though I'm not even sure how she learned how to do it. Meaning it might be possible for those outside the Leaf to learn it as well, Sora thought. Which is why she was attached to the Anbu Black Ops unit, was rarely deployed and was rarely discussed, Kakashi stated. She passed away. Many years ago. Though the specifics are unclear, the rumors I've heard? Okay? After saying, they are not happy, Naomi concluded. The response, true, seemed to surprise Kakashi. You seem to know a lot about everything else, but I'm surprised you know that much. It's not a huge surprise, I suppose. In the building across from them, a bell abruptly rang. With a sigh, Kakashi got up and said, it appears that I should go check on my students. I hope they fared well. He shook his head and looked at Sora and Naomi before saying, I'll see you two later. He also mentioned that they didn't run into each other. Kakashi leapt away as Sora nodded. When Kakashi was out of earshot, he turned to face his wife, who had a tight face and was hardly controlling her emotions. She shuddered against him and choked out a sob, but he put a hand on her shoulder and pulled her into an embrace, and then Naomi wiped her eyes, took a shaky breath, and the mask was back in place. A quiet, Hinata, came from Sora. Please, don't call me that out here, Naomi reprimanded. I'm okay, I apologize. Would you like to discuss it? There's nothing to say, said Naomi, shaking her head. Presumably, I didn't tell you much about her. I apologize, I simply didn't mean to keep it a secret. Softly, I understand, Sora said. With a faint smile, Naomi reached for his cheek and said, you do, don't you? I guess I'll have to deal with old ghosts eventually. Come on. Let's get going. The day is far from over yet. Naomi and her husband fell to the ground. By placing a hand on Sora's shoulder, she created a false impression that only he could perceive. Go, she was saying, follow the plan and use the proctor cover the Hokage gave you. Keep an eye on Orochimaru. After that, the choice is yours. Just don't forget what I said. His face was a strange mix of concern, resolve, and sadness as he gazed at her. Assuming what he was thinking, she reassured him, I'm fine. You will be? He asked without seeming persuaded. He must have been quite concerned about her earlier response. We have no time for this, she reminded him as she gently pushed his back. In a whisper, she said, just go. You of all people know how strong I am. After Sora sighed, all right, he gave her a cheek kiss and moved away. And Sora? He glanced behind him. Do try not to get yourself killed. He laughed, and you of all people know how strong I am. Don't worry, this is nothing compared to before. He waved lazily at her before vanishing in a puff of smoke. Naomi looked around. The students didn't appear to have started to leave the building yet. Excellent. She instantly stumbled out of sight, heaving into a bush and losing all appearance of composure. Please don't do that right now. Stop it, please, 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 she pleaded with no specific person. She closed her eyes tightly as dreadful images and memories suddenly came to her. That icy laugh reached her ears. The one that haunted her at night every night. No matter how hard she tried, she would never be able to forget it. Once more, the voice laughed. You were warned. You had a chance to kill me at the beginning and still you hesitated? Pitiful. So much skill, so much potential, so much power, the voice chided. And still you hold back, hold out hope. Another chuckle, poor naive Hinata. So strong, yet so weak. Your clanmates dying off by the day, happily running to their deaths, believing in you. What has it accomplished? How many remain? 10, 20. Your friends fare no better. How many more will you bury, I wonder? Quiet. How long until it's your sister's turn? How long until it's that boy of yours? How long until your compassion kills them all? She blurted, shut up, and rushed ahead. She paused once more. Even though it was only a split second, it felt like an eternity. Her blow only found air. Such a disappointment. A blade that was invisible sped toward her chest and stopped just short of her heart. As Shino rushed into view, Kiba, her savior, pushed her assailant back. Both were so worn out from the earlier battle that they could hardly stand. Oh, of course, here comes the dog. He growled, what the hell do you think you're doing? Once more, there was that icy laugh. She felt as though the darkness was enveloping and stretching around her. Was it an illusion, her imagination, or reality? She was no longer even certain. The memories then became a confused mess. She recalled a fight, as well as the blood. The amount of blood was enormous. She recalled the snarling shadows that surrounded them in the darkness. There are blades everywhere. Their opponent was far more formidable than she had ever thought possible. Or was she simply less strong? She was unaware. Later, as he attempted to rouse her from her daze, Shino was yelling and, for the first time, his mask was broken. We need to fight, Hinata. It's strange to see his normally stoic face displaying conflicting emotions. Why had she spent that moment obsessing over that little detail? What about Kiba? What about Sensei? We can still, she said, shaking her head, continuing to deny their reality. He pulled her to her feet and returned to the battle, shouting, he's gone. She's gone. They're both gone, and you need to accept that. They wouldn't want us dying for nothing like this. Now come on. Then Kiba's lifeless body was thrown indiscriminately to the ground in front of them. Her assailant reprimanded her, and yet another one falls. With anger and grief mingling, Hinata screamed. She had no idea how he had passed away. She had only known that she was to blame. She had been to blame for the whole thing. It must have been. She had let everyone down. The laugh came again. If you just made the decision, you would have a chance to win. I told you that power and victory have costs, and you don't seem willing to pay them. So, who will foot the bill for your next decision? After that, her memory became fuzzy once more. She remembered fighting desperately, struggling desperately, and Thena, it was over somehow. She couldn't recall how or even who had delivered the final blow, but she flew forward once more, trepidation forgotten in her rage. As she struggled to carry him away, she recalled that uncontrollable smile, one of the few she'd ever seen on his face, and knew that Shino had ultimately saved her life. Hold on, Shino, you'll be fine. You must be. I'm so sorry. I wish I had been more resilient. More inclined to. Nota your fault, he interrupted her in a whisper. Yes, Ida, he coughed up blood and said, don't blame yourself, Hinata. I am familiar with you. So you shouldn't tell lies to cheer me up. Listen to me, please. Your kindness and goodness are lacking these days. There's something wrong. He halted, wheezing. Don't let this ruin you. Hold on, we can talk about this when you're not bleeding to death. In an attempt to pull him forward, she screamed. His head dropped forward, dead. You always were always the best of USA, he said. Shino. She sobbed. How long had she sat there, holding her friend's body? Her sister and Naruto had finally located her, but she couldn't recall what had happened next. She was unable to recall either their or her own words. As tears clouded her vision, she swore to herself, never again. That was all she could remember. She was still trembling, breathing heavily, and fighting to keep her cool and ignore the memory. A familiar voice murmured, Naomi-san. When Naomi froze, she spun around and slashed at the woman behind her with the kunai she had pulled from her sleeve. I have to stop it. The woman's eyes were wide. Her kunai halted abruptly at Kurenai's throat, and she appeared surprisingly unfazed by the blade resting on her neck. Not that she would have had any trouble stopping such a wild strike if she'd wanted to. Iya, Naomi trembled. It's you, Kurenai, Iya. Without resistance, the woman put a hand over Naomi's and lowered her blade. Kurenai. Are you coming? From out of sight, a rough voice called. Asuma, Naomi wrote absently. Go on without me, Kurenai said casually. I'll catch up now. If you see my students, grab them. You got it, he replied. Kurenai embraced her and gave her a pat on the back. Kurenai, she tried again. I don't, Naomi gasped in surprise. The woman reassured her, I'm not upset, so you don't have to explain anything. I'm not injured. It's okay. I'm present. Yeah, I'm alright now, she said after a minute, letting Kurenai hold her and help her relax while she stood there in silence for a while. I'm sorry. You don't need to apologize for anything. I can attest to the fact that I have my fair share of deep scars. Do you want to go home with me? No, Naomi said with a wan smile and a shake of her head. No, it's all right. I intended to congratulate the students when I saw them following the first exam. I would prefer not to let this stand in my way. Kurenai nodded after squeezing her lips together. If you say so. I'm headed there already. Do you want to accompany me? Yes, Naomi said, nodding. I'd like that. Taking the woman's shoulder and guiding her back onto the main road, Kurenai grinned. Naomi was completely composed by the time she was back in sight. She glanced nervously in Kurenai's direction. Are you sure you aren't? With a smile, Kurenai said, mad? No, a blade to the neck is just another day for a ninja, isn't it? Besides, it's not your fault I surprised you. Stilla, she added. Shouldn't you be angrier? Could have hurt you, see, could have. No, you wouldn't have. That's why I didn't need to do anything. I trust you, even at your worst. With her cheeks flushed, Naomi swore, What are you talking about? You've known me for less than a year. You're far too trusting and forgiving, she said. Kurenai gave her a look and laughed. Naomi seemed unable to conceal anything based on her response. I wouldn't have pegged you as the shy type. You're starting to sound like Hinata. As taunting shifted the topic, Naomi's eyes widened in surprise before she tsked in annoyance. Oh god, I am not like that girl, she sighed. Kurenai raised her eyebrows. You sure? It's not a bad thing. You share a lot of her positive traits. Honestly, I'd be proud if she became half the person you are. Naomi looked curiously at Kurenai and nearly skipped a step, asking, what? What do you mean, what? You're capable, brilliant, and skilled, but most of all, you are wise and true. You're everything I hope to see her become in the future, Kurenai said, laughing in her face. However, she said with a knowing look, it seems like this is another trait you two share. You don't seem to realize how much those around you respect you. You should work on that. HMPH, complained Naomi. Still, she couldn't help but smile a little. They kept approaching the gates. Naomi turned to face Kurenai as they were approaching, and she said, thank you, to her. For what? Her words were, for everything, sensei, for more than you can ever know. We're friends, aren't we? There's nothing to thank me for, Kurenai said, giving her a back pat. Naomi simply gave a headshake. Friends? Well, I suppose we are. Come on, she said, gesturing to the 4 genin teams, Asuma, and Kakashi who were watching Guy sob wildly with joy. Let's get over there before Guy scars them any worse. The whole group turned to face them as they approached. Kurenai. Sensei, Naomi.san, we all passed, exclaimed Hinata, who was the first to spot the pair, as she peeled off and ran in their direction. Since they hadn't failed the first time, Naomi had anticipated it. Nevertheless, she gave the girl a pat on the head and smiled. Congratulations, Hinata.san. As she went on toward them, Naruto noticed her and grinned. Naomi.ne, I did it. But where were you? You and Sora.ni don't want to be Chunin. With a laugh and a shake of her head, Naomi said, to be honest, I wouldn't actually care myself. That said, we've both been promoted already. What? How? Demanded Naruto. Sasuke laughed. Of course they have, you idiot. Did you really think every single person got promoted this way? This is just the most straightforward way to prove it. Didn't Kakashi Sensei already say the main point of these exams was to show our strength to other villages? Do you ever listen? Sakura responded. It doesn't matter, it's still a pain. We only have a few hours before the next phase of the exam starts. Hey, Asuma. Sensei, can I drop out yet? Shikamaru yawned and waved the pair away. No, Asuma replied, not even bothering to look at the boy as he kept his bewildered gaze on Guy. Shrugging, Shikamaru said, what a hassle. As the students carried on chatting, gossiping, and celebrating their first accomplishment, Naomi let herself get lost in the background. The group began to disperse from the exam building after a few more minutes, with the teachers opting to take their students to lunch before leading them to the fourth training ground for the second phase. Naomi slowed and fell to the back of the group, where Sasuke was leading the way, as the group strolled through the village and Kurenai was finally distracted from worrying about her any longer. He gave her his signature glower when he saw her, but he didn't say anything. She didn't want to kill Sasuke, and she had been honest with Sora about it, but when she had stated that she would kill him if necessary, she had also been speaking the truth. But that didn't mean she couldn't at least try to prevent that result. She decided that I might as well try to reason with him, she said. A word of advice for the next phase, to the boy. Work with Naruto-kun and Sakura-san. You'll need to rely on them for this next test. Don't let your pride be what kills you. You don't think I can handle myself? He asked accusingly, narrowing his eyes at her. Naomi nodded her head. It's not that. I've seen you fight and know you're capable, especially for one so young. I just think anyone who wants to fight 3 people trying to kill them by themselves because they think they're the best is a fool. She looked him in the eye. And the only one here in danger of doing that is you. Sasuke laughed. I'm not trying to pass the exams. I don't care about my rank. All I want is to test my strength and get stronger. My brother was much stronger than me at my age. I need to catch up. And what exactly is the point of all of that if you just die during the test? I won't die that easily. Do you know how many dead friends I have that told me that first? Asked Naomi, with a wry smile on her face. He objected. They weren't me. Naomi concurred, saying, no, they were stronger, more experienced, and more skilled than you. Tell me, Sasuke-san. I heard you battled Lee-san. Do you think you could defeat him? I'm not sure, he said candidly after pausing. And you met that boy from the sand? He grunted without responding. She tilted her head and said, that's what I thought, but at least you can evaluate the situation as it actually is. You wouldn't face a losing battle by yourself. So why do you have to fight your brother by yourself? She inquired. Sasuke paused, as if unsure of how to respond. I don't know. Finally, he said, I guess I never really thought about it, because I never expected anyone else to help me, and besides, why would anyone but me choose to fight someone like my brother? In any case, it's my fight, he said, shaking his head. I must be the one to exact revenge on my clan. Naomi waited for Sasuke to continue without responding. Sora-san told me something once, he said, giving her a strange look. Is it true that you lost your clan as well after the mission in Wave? He asked. As she said, so he mentioned that, did he? I suppose I can see why. Yes, he was correct. I am the last member of my clan. Naomi paused for a moment before continuing. If I can ask what happened. She looked sad at him. They were killed by the machinations of one man and his allies. Half of them died in a single battle, along with my father. The rest died over the course of years. We fought back, but it wasn't enough. Not for my clan, nor for the rest of my friends. Then you want revenge on those who killed them, then? Just like me? After giving the question some thought, Naomi shook her head. I won't deny that killing that man or those who helped him might be somewhat a cathartic. However, what would it matter in the end? My father is dead. My sister is dead. My family, my friends are all dead. No, his death wouldn't amount to a single one of them. Naomi breathed deeply. My only motivation is stopping him from taking anything else from me. What point is there in thirsting for revenge and allowing him to control my life even further in that way? She raised her hand. I hate him, of course. And I'd kill someone so dangerous in a heartbeat if given the chance. How could I not? But killing him out of vengeance? No, I would not work towards something so pointless. I prefer to live my life the way I want to, on my own terms, rather than spend years hunting someone down out of hatred. I've already lost enough. I don't need to let anyone take any happiness I could hope to find from me as well. This response appeared to surprise Sasuke. She raised a hand, but he appeared to want to argue. Take it from someone who's older than you and has killed plenty of traitors and enemies, some of whom had even hurt or killed those close to me. I may never have killed the mastermind, but I've gotten my fair share of the vengeance you seem to chase after so desperately. It doesn't bring your happiness back. It won't fill the void you feel inside. You're better off building whatever new happiness you can, rather than expecting someone's death to magically fix your problems for you. Nothing else in life works that way. Why would this? He still looked surprised, but a little intrigued. So, a desire for vengeance isn't what made you strong? Asked the man. She laughed and shook her head, saying, I'm stronger when I fight with Sora, not alone. And I don't mean that figuratively. There are techniques we could only use together. If I'd stewed alone about vengeance, I'd never have grown as much. If I'd run out on my own like an idiot, chasing after the person who killed my friends at the beginning, all I'd have accomplished would have been stalling my growth or getting myself killed. You'd be surprised how much more you could accomplish with just a little support, the right teacher, or even just a little patience. That said, she continued, her voice growing piercing and rapacious as she glared at him, don't think that makes me weak or that I'm just saying pretty words. I'll take the necessary steps to safeguard the people and things I value. I will fight whoever I have to. I'll kill whoever I have to. Whoever it is. Whatever it takes. Some people simply must die, but seeking revenge is pointless. All I do is make sure it's on my terms. At least you don't seem as soft as some of the others here, Sasuke said, nodding, and appearing to treat her differently, as if there was finally a glimmer of respect in his face. Naomi Tsked, well, maybe. Compared to most ninja in the Leaf, I have witnessed and lost more. However, you would be wise to avoid underestimating anyone here. For example, your own instructor. Although he presents a cheerful exterior, Kakashi-san has witnessed more death and loss than most people in this village. After a while, Sasuke gave her a slight nod, looking thoughtful. I'll think about what you've said, he grunted, I'm not sure if I agree with you about vengeance. However, if Itachi dies, perhaps the rest is irrelevant. He looked at her and said, maybe I should think of another strategy. At the very least, I won't let my pride be the reason Itachi survives. That would not be acceptable. She gave the boy an acknowledging nod. She didn't need to say anything more because she knew from experience that Sasuke was reticent in these kinds of situations, and she started to back away from Kurenai and the other teachers. The rest was in Sora's hands, but Naomi pursed her lips as she drifted out of Sasuke's line of sight. It's not exactly what I was hoping he'd take away from that, she thought, but at least he seems to be considering it. That's better than nothing. Naomi excused herself as the group arrived at their lunch destination, having decided to review the plans with the Hokage again. They'd done it many times already, but it wouldn't hurt to do it again. With a final glance at the student body, she grinned warmly to herself, thinking, so innocent, so oblivious to the danger that lies ahead, and hoping that this attack would be the worst thing they see. She flickered away and made a hand sign as she disappeared from view. Tracing the gravestone with his new, slender fingers, Orochimaru looked at his borrowed garments blowing in the wind and said, this disguise is flawless, and with my knowledge, impersonation will be simple. It didn't really matter, though, because even if the Leaf discovered him, they couldn't have predicted what was going to happen, and he would destroy this village in one way or another. Orochimaru stopped when he heard a rustle behind him. Kabuto, he said, turning to face the newcomer. How was the first phase? Did you succeed in passing? He laughed in a mocking tone. Of course, Orochimaru. Sama, the boy said with a grim smile. For me, such a test is useless. Of course it is, Orochimaru said, turning to face him with a sly smile. The idiots here in the Leaf are nothing compared to you. How is the mission going? How do you feel about the boy from Uchiha? Kabuto grinned and said, I promise. However, aside from a quick altercation I witnessed prior to the test, I have not yet witnessed him engage in real combat. He might be a good fit to take Kimimaro's place as your new host body, in my opinion. I'll proceed as scheduled. Perfect, keep following him. Thank him. Kabuto nodded and replied, of course, Orochimaru. Sama, I will not fail. Orochimaru turned back to the grave before him as Kabuto flickered away, scowling as he thought about what lay ahead. He knew that his plan couldn't possibly fail, but still. Someone might have been of the Leaf, he thought, and if they were, I would have to be ready, just in case. He already possessed the genetic material of the first and second Hokage, but there was no reason why he couldn't obtain more from other strong Leaf shinobi. He grinned ruthlessly at the name on the gravestone beneath him. I didn't think there was anyone left that still cared so much for you after that incident. He saw that the grave in front of him was clean and had fresh flowers in front of it, suggesting that it had recently been tended to. Don't worry, I'll give you a new, grand purpose. He had little time before the next part of the test started, so Orochimaru started to mentally list the people he should prioritize. Sarutobi was about to have a rude awakening. He looked at the monument that loomed in the distance and said, I'm looking forward to seeing you again, Sarutobi. Sensei. He laughed, realizing that this was going to be enjoyable. God, she's even creepier and scarier than I remembered, Sora thought as he sat on a branch with a view of the Forest of Death, where he could see Enko Mitarashi gleefully threatening anyone who dared to approach. Enko was quite capable, but she also had an interesting personality, and for Sora, she had also passed away years ago. He had known her quite well during the war, and since she and Kakashi had grown close over the years, it was practically inevitable. He watched as the crowd grew until he spotted his A star target. A tall boy wearing a straw hat and a kusagakure marked forehead protector, flanked by two Kusa-born teammates. When Team 7 had first fought him during the exam, he had been alone, but Sasuke had informed him that Orochimaru had taken their place before the exam, so he knew that traitor wasn't the one in disguise, it was probably two of the Sound Four. Not that it mattered to Sora, whoever it was wouldn't even be able to slow him down. I never did learn who Orochimaru's teammates were during his infiltration, he realized. He thought about what Naomi had said again. What is the right decision, he asked himself again. He kept his composure as all of the genin taking part in the second phase finally assembled. Anko started to explain the rules of the exam's second phase, but he hardly listened to her because he was so focused on Orochimaru and his decision to come that he couldn't let him go anywhere in the village unattended, especially not close to any of the Leaf's less skilled shinobi. The test began shortly after, and Sora watched the fictitious Kusa team as they got their scroll and made their way to the starting point. The team rushed forward as the second phase got underway, and Sora waited for a short while before rushing after them. For about 30 minutes, he followed the team through the forest, watching them move as though they were hunting prey. At first, Orochimaru must have been playing along, just to throw any potential tails off his scent. Sora had to give it to them. They were moving at a slow pace, slower than a high-level shinobi, at least, and they were prone to small mistakes. If he hadn't known about the future, he would have been convinced they were a true genin team. The team soon took a break to rest and reassemble, but Sora observed that nothing had changed. What is Orochimaru up to? The man was tempted to simply drop down and ambush them, but he was starting to have his doubts because something about this team seemed too strange, and he couldn't risk Orochimaru escaping. Sora's head snapped to look in the direction of the faint grating noise, which was too faint for anyone unfamiliar with it to notice, but he was familiar with it. It was the grating sound of sand. He made the quick connection and thought, oh no, he saw the tiny grains of sand moving silently and slowly in the direction of the phony Kusa team. Gaara, he's here. This is way too fast, Sora thought. He admired and even respected Gaara, whom Sora had thought of as a close friend before his death at the start of the war, but now that he was dangerous and murderous, he wanted to stay as far away from him as possible until he battled his younger self, but fate had other ideas. There were too many variables, and Sora wasn't sure what to make of it. As the sand continued to move toward the false Kusa ninja, still apparently unaware, Sora felt a sense of dread. Is he making contact with Orochimaru? Does he not realize he's in disguise? Then the yelling began. What the hell? Sora watched, his eyes wide, as the team in front of him was covered and suffocated by the sand. The three ninja never had a chance as the sand moved around, grabbing the team's scroll and bringing it back towards Gaara. The sand shivered and collapsed inwards as Gaara walked into view, raising a hand and then making a fist. The screaming ceased and the sand slid away from the bodies. As their brother reached for the scroll, Temari and Konkuro emerged at his side. Identical to ours. Gaara muttered, useless, and tossed the scroll back into his sand, crushing it, saying, worthless trash. He held up a hand and signaled his siblings to follow him back into the shadows, and they did as he said without question. He dropped to the ground and walked slowly over to the scene of the massacre, but Sora waited until they had vanished back into the trees and were far enough away to miss him. He doubted that Gaara had any chance against Orochimaru at this moment, but he had to be certain, and it was too good to hope that Gaara had just killed Orochimaru for him. Sora kneeled beside the lead ninja's body, which was motionless in fear, but it remained that way. Shit, Sora swore. He knew that this was not Orochimaru. It never was. He shook his head, thinking that he could have saved them this time if he hadn't been so confident in himself. It was too late to dwell on it now. This was Bada very bad. He didn't know where Sasuke, the snake's likely target, was at this point, and he didn't know where Orochimaru was either. Things just became much more complicated. Looking up at the sky, Sora said, "Where the hell are you, you bastard?" His range was still limited, so he couldn't look very far, especially in a forest this size, but it was better than nothing. Baikugan, he whispered, as a bewildering amount of information flooded his mind. He had to locate Orochimaru immediately, regardless of his whereabouts or whether he was now impersonating someone. He made some shadow clones, and they all jumped into the canopy above, spreading out to look for any indication of Team 7 or Orochimaru, and he sent one to get in touch with Naomi, telling her to get in touch with him as soon as possible. He promised, "I'll find you, Orochimaru," and after another moment, Sora also leapt into the trees.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.